Okay, thank you, Ms. Pickford. We'll start with we'll move on to our student body reports, and I will start with Lake City High School tonight.
Sorry about that. Good evening, esteemed board chair, honorable trustees, superintendent Cook, and district administration. My name is Emma Bull, and I am the ASB vice president at Lake City High School. Also with me tonight is ASB president Amani Pereira. Our other two ASB officers, Chloe Teets and Claire Mitchell, are with our women's basketball team preparing for tomorrow's district championship. Last month was Fight for the Fish, and we are proud to have won the Fish for the 9th year in a row. Every year, Fight for the Fish is a new challenge for us at Lake City. A challenge to involve our entire building in our efforts. A challenge to rise to the expectations of our community. And a challenge to meet and exceed the bar we've set for ourselves in previous years. Our LC family is truly incredible. The amount of support we received from our administration, teachers, custodians, and student body was on full display at Fight for the Fish. We're so grateful for the opportunity to support the Human Rights Task Force and show our community how special our school is during that event. And we want to publicly thank everyone who helped us to make our 9-peat happen. This month is busy as usual at Lake City. Next week is our winter dance, and we're looking forward to having fun with our students from around the district before the long weekend. Our women's basketball team is also preparing for the district championship tomorrow, and we're excited to pack the den one more time this season. We also had 13 students place in this weekend at the Thomas S. Foley Memorial Forensics Tournament in Spokane Valley, and 10 students who performed this weekend at all-state choir, orchestra, and band concerts. This month, we will also be starting preparations for the SAT test on April 9th by beginning our SAT prep program after school, starting tomorrow and running for the next 8 weeks. As we get closer to the test, we'll be making test prep plans for our students that include using resources like Khan Academy, Albert, and College Board to make sure our students are as confident and prepared as possible. Our college and career advisor, Mrs. Delgizi, is also taking a large group of our students to a tour of the K-Tech and Parker facilities next week and updating her podcast with episodes on scholarships and information for our juniors as we get further into the spring. She also created an all-grade planning seminar called the Now and Next Summit for March 18th from 5 to 7 p.m. to give information to all classes on what they should be doing now to get ready for what comes next. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight, and we'll see you again next month.
Okay, and how about Venture High School, please?
Hello, my name is Rachel Hughes, and I'd like to thank each of you for this opportunity to come up today and share what's been going on at Venture. As you may or may not be aware of, Venture High School was featured on the front page of Coeur d'Alene Press this last week. This was as a direct result of an art program my old senior project mentor, local artist Chelsea Cordova, and I have decided to launch at my high school, and just about how it's progressed. This program, not being an accredited course, will take place during our extended learning hour on Wednesday as an opportunity for those with an extended learning pass to get together and create art in a meaningful and impactful way for all skill types. This program will be hosted by Whitney Hamill, our Consumer and Family Sciences teacher, and primarily facilitated by myself and the other interested students. We will be modeling this art opportunity after the open studio process, which involves intention setting through free writing, intuitive art making, and a reflection and witnessing period, and an open layout setup. The process is highly therapeutic in addition to helping strengthen one's connection with the right brain and more intuitive nature. I believe a program which integrates this process into it is going to be extraordinarily beneficial for Venture. Art establishes a sense of connection and community, and this opportunity, being primarily student-ran, will allow for a lot of opportunities for students involved to learn leadership skills and grow creatively together, as well as bring another aspect of connectivity to the student life here. Chelsea and I both see art as a phenomenal way of not only expression of self and skill, but also as something that holds a lot of therapeutic value. And we are so excited for the startup of such a valuable program at Venture, and we're excited to see how it progresses from here. I feel as if integration of the arts into our school has the potential to do great things for the lives of our students, and I thank you once again for your time, and I look forward to joining you guys again next month.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. I think you had a quote in the paper that said something about leaving a legacy for the school or something to that effect. So congratulations. I think you've started something great there, and to do that in this short time, that's impressive. So congratulations. Okay, Coeur d'Alene High School. Here we are. Good evening, ladies.
Good afternoon, school board and community members. I'm JC Brockoff, and I'm the president of events and publicity at Coeur d'Alene High School. And this is Geneva Bankston. Excuse me, and she's the president of dances and assemblies. Thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of Coeur d'Alene High School. So last month we hosted the annual Fight for the Fish against Lake City. Although we lost for the 9th year in a row, it was tough, but we did lose by only 4 points out of 500, so we're pretty proud of that. And more importantly, we got to donate to the Human Rights Association. So we just wrapped up second semester with final exams and are really excited for all the events we have planned. We're very proud of our cheerleaders for winning first place in every category this weekend at the Prairie Classic cheer competition, or 2 weekends ago, sorry. This Wednesday, our drama department will be holding auditions for the 2019 musical, Beauty and the Beast, and we're really excited to see this amazing performance. Next week, we're partnering with the Make-A-Wish Foundation to host a Wish Week. So our school is raising money, and we're going to help send a little boy named Jackson to Hawaii. He's 8 years old, and so we're going to have an assembly for that and just get to support him on his fight. Also, spring sports start on February 22nd, so we're excited to watch all our teams compete this spring. Our DECA class is traveling to Boise to compete in the state competition and qualify for nationals in Orlando. And that same weekend, Student Council is going to be traveling to Boise for our annual statewide conference. Thank you for your time, and we'll see you next month.
Okay, I'm glad you both brought up Fight for the Fish. I attended this year. I think it was my 5th year in a row. And it was an amazing experience this year to see it in Viking Court, and just the turnout. It was awesome if you got to be there. So great job to both schools. I was really impressed. So, good job. And then finally, student body reports. Is anyone from K-Tech here tonight? All right.
Is it on?
And just make sure the red light's on there.
Okay, so yes. First, I just want to thank you guys for giving me and K-Tech the opportunity to come and share what we've been doing. I think it's an amazing program. I personally am in the computer program, and we're learning networking and how to fix computers and the insides and outs, and I think it's a very good and amazing opportunity for a student that excels in normal school or even does well in normal school to start to discover their career path. And one thing that we are going to be trying to do is on February 22nd, we are going to have a job fair. We're going to just have a bunch of people from the community and our industries come in and just interview us and get our resumes and see if they would maybe potentially, hire us or have us in their college in the future. And again, I just want to thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to present and to support my school, K-Tech.
Okay, Mr. Twitchell, are you ready with the CEA report? And there goes the crowd again.
For the rest of you sitting, you might want to leave too. So, all right. Board Chair Morrisroe, board members, Superintendent Cook, district office employees, guests, friends, enemies, anybody else that's here, thank you for this opportunity. Before I jump into this, a few things. One, I promise I actually did put on a nice button-up shirt this morning for this, but my yearbook students completed our official yearbook sweatshirt that they designed, did all the screen printing, did everything, and so I'm fairly proud of this. I'm proud of them for that. Also, I was earlier this weekend reading a study because I'm always trying to look for ways for students to do better, and one of them definitely talked about the importance of having breakfast in the morning, because with a full belly, they're not worried about eating, they're not worried about their stomachs being empty and grumbling. But the thing I found most interesting in it all, though, was talking about if you can give them frozen orange juice, it does help them concentrate. Thank you. Alrighty. And then the last thing before I really get going here, just so all of you know, today I did have the opportunity to purchase some KISS tickets, the greatest rock band in the world. And I did say yes to it, and I was about ready to actually buy them, and then I thought, wait, what day is that concert? So I went and looked it up, and it's tonight. And I thought, well, there's no way I can miss the board meeting. It's going to be so much better. So no pressure on you up there. Alrighty, so thank you very much. So a few things I'd like to talk about. First off, as I'm sure all of you are aware, the curriculum audit that is going on, will be going on, has caused quite a bit of stress, angst, all kinds of other words along those lines, synonyms for those. And over time, though, thing has calmed down. We're thankful that Dr. Cook, and I imagine you, the board, were able to negotiate and get some more time for us to collect the evidence on that. We just ask that if in the future more advance notice could be given on these types of things. When I was talking to staff all over the district about this, they're already feeling overloaded, overwhelmed, and then when just something is kind of sprung on them like that, it's just almost the straw that breaks the camel's back, and can cause them to snap. Along those lines, also a lot of people express concerns that there is a bit of a disconnect between the board as well as the district office and what's actually happening in the classrooms. And so they expressed a desire that perhaps if board members, district office peoples could come into the classrooms more often, speak one-on-one with the teachers. What's going on? What are the problems? What are you experiencing? Just to have more of an awareness of that. The next thing to talk about here is CAPS, where great stuff is happening. One of the most recent things that we've come about with that is we are working on kind of a definition of between what meetings are and events are. And this has been something that we've been trying to work with the district on for several years, and with the traditional negotiation tactics, it just didn't go anywhere. But with this new CAPS process, being able to have subcommittees on it, it's just fantastic, wonderful, amazing. I have nothing but good stuff to say about this negotiations process. And so I know that we, the CEA members, are very grateful that the district has agreed to go to that last year to do the training for it, continued training as we're doing it as well. Another thing that's come up in CAPS, though, is the issue of class sizes. And I know that's always an issue, and about the only way to really address that is money, which is something that there's never enough of in education. But that is something that we are definitely going to be working with Dr. Cook and those on the CAPS team to see what we can do to help remedy that situation. Because anytime those caseloads, workloads can get lower, so does the stress level. At least in theory it does. The last thing I was going to talk about, I kind of had my thunder stolen a little bit from some emails I got today. I was going to talk about the issue of what was in the paper recently regarding the administrators, principals, and being able to talk about the levy. But from my understanding, that is being addressed and being taken care of, and so we are very grateful for that. But so in total closing, I'd just like to say, let's start high school later, and thank you.
Okay, we've got a couple brief trustee comments here, and I'm going to go ahead and start. One, I just want to make mention that the Coeur d'Alene Education Partnership will be hosting their annual State of the District event, and that's coming up on February 19th at 5:30 at the Innovation Collective. And I believe Dr. Cook and others will be presenting there on various district happenings, so we hope that you can attend that. And then next, just briefly, Mr. Twitchell touched on it there, but late start times, if you've been to our board meetings or watched them or read the paper lately, we've had some discussions around later start times, particularly with secondary students. And Dr. Morrisroe's here again to talk to us today, I'm sure, about that. And it is something that I think at the last meeting we talked about it, we're going to get it on an agenda, hopefully later this spring sometime. We haven't quite figured out which month yet, but that is in the works. We've got a number of things cooking right now, curricular audits and buildings and all sorts of stuff. So it is on our agenda to at least start that process or to have some discussion around that. So I just wanted to let that be known. And then Ms. May, I think you had a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up with Mr. Twitchell's comments and say on behalf of the board, we thank you and every staff member who collected student work. We know that it was a huge ask in a short time frame, so we really do appreciate your efforts. And I also wanted to thank all community members that are going to be participating in our focus groups tomorrow and the next day, and all parents who completed a survey. All this information is going to be comprehensive, we hope, and give us kind of a direction for maybe a new strategic plan for our district. So stay tuned. I've been told that maybe late April, early May, we might have all of the data back and we'll be able to present it early May. We'll be able to present it to you guys hopefully in a workshop format where the community can participate and listen in. So thank you.
Okay, we have reached our public comment time here, and before we do, I just need to read a little something, so bear with me. I want to remind the public, while this is a meeting of the Board of Trustees that takes place in public, it is not a meeting with the public. It's a meeting of the board to conduct district business. The board does allow some limited public comment on district-related items. Those wishing to address the board during the public comment period are limited to one comment not to exceed 3 minutes. If you have additional comments that you would like to present to the board, you may provide those comments in writing to the clerk of the board, Ms. Lynn Town, and she will ensure that we receive your additional commentary. Please keep in mind that the board members will not respond to public comment. If I determine that an individual statement is too lengthy, personally directed, abusive, or repetitive, I may terminate that speaker's privilege to address the board. We've got quite a few signed up tonight. I'll keep the time up here, and I'll just try to flag you and let you know if we're getting close. And if you see me waving my arm at you a little bit, if you can just try to wrap things up, I'd appreciate it. And we will start just at the top of the list here. Carrie Frank. Good evening, Carrie. And for those of you who haven't been with us before, just make sure that mic, the red light's on the mic there, and the mic right below your mouth tends to work the best.
Good.
Thank you.
Is that good? Good. Thank you. Thank you for letting us speak tonight. I know you've seen me a lot since this summer, but I've had a lot of thoughts this past week and thought, what better way to present it than here? My husband makes fun of me. He calls me the queen of feedback because I like to provide feedback, but I feel like I'm polite about it. So I was doing a little bit of research, talking to a few parents from the Post Falls and the Lakeland school districts, and just talking to them about their increase in their population in their schools. I feel like in the industry that I'm in, you have to think outside the box. You know, nothing that I do is black and white. It's very gray. And so it's all about research and feedback. And just keep in mind, this is all just parent feedback that I received. And over the last few years, Post Falls, they've been able to build a school in 3 months due to the demand that they needed. Again, they are building plans, and they are again building another school and set to open this fall. So then it crossed my mind, why are we taking almost 2 years to build a school? And again, I don't understand budgets and things like that. That is definitely your guys' area of expertise. But again, when speaking to Lakeland parents, I guess we know quite a few families that have moved up there, including family, and they also have an awesome just timeline, and the parents felt that it was very appropriate and the way that they're adjusting for their growth in the schools. And again, I know we have had many different factors with new superintendent and purchasing land. I know they have much more options to purchase land when you go out west and when you go up north. So that brings me to Nexa. And as you guys know, my kids go to Nexa. We were part of the rezoning from Atlas. And so my kids, my 2 girls who were actually here, did the kinder center at Nexa. Then we went back to Atlas, and now we're back at Nexa. So no complaints. I am very happy with the move. But when you guys do receive that 30 to 60 day, or after the 30 to 60 day period, when you do receive the details of what it would take to raise Nexa to that code that you discussed in the last meeting, I just hope that you would keep in mind, what is a timeline to fix it? Are we waiting till the 2020? Could it be even longer? Based upon what Post Falls has done and Lakeland has done, could we look at what could we do this summer to even bring it up to code? And again, I don't understand budget-wise. I just, having listened to this last summer, a lot of the parents that were very upset about all the promises that were made and the levy passing, and now we're not doing anything. I do worry about the levy in March. I do worry about the support of it from the community and from the parents of the kids in our school district. And so I had a thought, and I know you guys have already made your decision, but what can we do to Nexa over this short period of time to make it up to code, and then also a K through 8 to relieve all the pressure that is coming from the middle schools that, as we know, are growing actually faster than our elementary schools. I understand, with the 510 apartments and the 450 homes building just around where the new school will be built, I totally understand attendance zones, having us been transferred schools a few times, but also if we were to do that to Nexa, that would actually give us more room to take on those kids as a temporary until the new school is built. So just a little bit of relief there. I also talking with a few other parents, they are interested. Nothing really holds us to Coeur d'Alene, like Coeur d'Alene, Post Falls, Rathdrum. We're all so close together, and so I think a lot of thoughts through parents' minds is, why do I have to stay here? They're making promises, they're not fulfilling them. I could go to Post Falls, I could go to Rathdrum. I personally have 4 children in the school district, and next year I'll have all 5 of them in the school district, and so it's a big thing, ranging from high school to elementary school. And my husband and I, we both work from home. We could live anywhere. We love Coeur d'Alene. Our kids would be very mad at us if we left the Coeur d'Alene School District. They love it. But again, we just want to make sure that we're providing the best things and the best growth for our children. And lastly, just to keep in mind the middle school and the growth that we're having in there. And so I know elementary has been a hot topic, but also middle school. And then just, if we could present more of a 3 to 5 year plan and help ease those parents that are probably kind of stressed out about what's going on, where are my kids going to go. So I appreciate your time and hope you find a way to accommodate as many goals and as many things as people are asking of you all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Carrie. Next up is Sue Depew.
Yeah. I'm here because there has been a lot of talk about arming teachers across the country.
Fresh off his election win, Chad Christensen, who was elected to the Idaho House of Representatives in seat 32B, has introduced his school carry bill, which would allow anyone with an enhanced concealed weapons license to carry in K-12 schools. He's also calling for every sheriff in Idaho to train teachers quarterly. First of all, let me say that this idea horrifies me, and I know I'm not alone. Guns do not belong in schools, which are meant to be places of sanctuary, safety, and learning for children. The presence of guns at schools adds an unpredictable element that puts educators and students at increased risk. There's no evidence that arming teachers will make schools safer. Arming civilians is not an effective way to stop active shooters. Research indicates the presence of a gun at school makes children less safe. If teachers and other employees carry guns into schools, we can expect tragic accidents. I believe in the Second Amendment. I understand that our country was founded on the right of citizens to bear arms. But no right is absolute. Rights come with responsibilities. We live in a civil society of laws to keep people safe on our roads, to protect from fraud and misrepresentation, and so on. Laws surrounding gun ownership should be no different. Before a teacher is ever armed, we as a civil society should implement sensible gun laws. There are those who say laws don't work, but I say nonsense. There will always be bad people who break laws, but there are far more people who do not. Arming teachers and other school district personnel is counterintuitive to solving the problem of the threat of gun violence in our communities. Before lawmakers put pressure on school boards and teachers to carry weapons, those of us against Christensen's proposal should be putting pressure back on lawmakers to do their jobs and enact laws that work. I want to thank you for letting me share my opinion on this, and Alice has some handouts on gun safety and arming teachers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Next up, Bill Rutherford.
And I'm here tonight to advocate for 315 kids and 54 amazing staff members. A little history. 2 years and 2 months ago, Superintendent Handelman, Dr. Orozco, and I sat at Bakery by the Lake, and we were tasked with a proposal to come up with a school that would be successful if a bond were to pass by the votes of our community. So we talked, and we really felt that project-based learning, expeditionary learning, kids learning inside the classroom and outside the classroom was an awesome opportunity for our students. So we also thought that students of all abilities should be able to learn together. And after numerous conversations and then finally the passing of the bond, we put together a school called Northwest Expedition Academy. And 4 superintendents later, 3 CFOs later, we still have today the exact conversation we had then. What should NEXA look like, and where should it be housed? I'm here to ask for some urgency. Our parents and our staff and our students really like to know, what does our future look like? The last 2.5 years has been super exciting. We've had tons of opportunity. I believe we built a school to encourage kids and a school to really support kids, and we're ready to move forward. We're ready to do the work that we're doing. We're ready to make that bigger. We're ready to access more students, give more students the opportunity that we have given our 315 students that we're here advocating for tonight. And we also have an urgent ask. We were tasked to open up a school with no budget. The budget was going to come when the new school was built. So we had 0 library books. We've worked really hard and have an awesome community that's donated 5,000 library books to us. So now we have a library. We have no librarian. Our librarian's half-time. Every other school in the district has a full-time librarian. We have a half-time title teacher. Every other school in the district has a full-time title teacher that has title services. We have we have a half-time ALP teacher. Every other school in the district has a full-time ALP teacher. I'm asking for equity. I'm asking for our school to have the same resources, the same opportunity as every other school in our district. And I think, if we're here to advocate, we could talk about buildings forever, and we have literally talked about buildings forever. And really what happens inside that building is much more important than that building itself. So I think this ask isn't something unreasonable, and I think it's essential. I kind of think it's a crisis. I think it's something we need to address like today. Our school is important, and our staff's important. And I am kind of ridiculous right now, but I'm passionate about what we do. And I know that you'll hear lots of people tonight. We'll talk about our building and about what it looks like and how it should feel inside of our building, and just bringing it up to the standards that every student should be allowed to have. And that's super important. But also filling it full of the people that do the work, the people that help kids learn. I'm asking tonight that is something that's in the center of our plate, not as something that's dessert. If that makes sense. So I thank you for listening. I know you're passionate about this work too. So please consider my concerns. Thank you.
Okay, next up is Jessica Novak.
Okay, is that working? Good evening, Board Chair Morrisroe, Superintendent Cook, and board members. My name is Jessica Novak, and I am here tonight to address the future of NEXA. I realize that this is an issue that is a big deal in my mind, as well as my coworkers and the parents of our students, and I hope it's important to you because it matters. It matters because each of these students matter. We all know the future location of the school is up in the air, and the conversations that will happen in the months to come may be heated and passionate, but as a teacher at this school, there are a few things I would like to share. As you arrive at NEXA, you'll find limited parking and possibly even see bricks falling off the building. When you enter our building, you will hear the floors creak and the walls may sometimes rumble due to PE while Mrs. Cristondo blasts music for the kids as they run around in their elated state. If you are courageous enough, you may venture outside to the north building to visit our 2nd through 4th graders. On the walk there, you'll see cracked concrete and a field that looks like it is in the middle of a drought. Once you enter the north building, you'll hear lockers slamming and see kids moving about the halls on their way to specials, lunch, and recess. While these things are inconvenient, you will see, they are not the things that make NEXA who we are. If you look in classrooms, you will see students of all ability levels participating and engaging in authentic, real-world learning that is accessible for each and every child. Students rarely leave their classroom peers or teacher and excel in their growth, both academically and socially, due to this. If you followed us on an expedition to study soils, you would see a 4th grader who has never had a chance to be in the forest reach out and touch moss for the very first time. The pure delight on his face would never leave your mind. If you looked in a classroom before or after school hours, you would see teachers collaborating, developing new PBLs, and writing grants while always keeping the question of, is this what's best for students at the front of their mind? Our students are learning and growing in ways that I have never seen students grow in during my time as a teacher at multiple schools in multiple states. As you consider the future of where we will be, please keep in mind that we are working hard at growing each of these students to their fullest potential each day. Our students deserve the opportunity to continue to grow and flourish in surroundings that are equitable to those of their peers across the district. Whether that choice is upgrading the current NEXA site or moving us to a new building, I strongly encourage you all to make a decision as quickly and responsibly as possible that best fits the needs of our students and the learning they do in the project-based learning and expedition model. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Barbara? Will you say it for me? Ostapico, thank you.
I'd like to say good evening to the board, Superintendent Cook, Mr. Morrisroe. Thank you for the opportunity to address you tonight. My grandson is a student at Nexa, and we were delighted when he was able to go there. It's a perfect place for him. It is a warm, welcoming environment, and we couldn't be happier. His great first grade teacher, Sarah King, in case anybody needs to know. Many of the people who've spoken with you tonight say they don't understand the challenges. Well, I'm here to tell you I do. I'm a career educator of 37 years, and I come from a district of 180,000. I know about growth. I worked in a school that had 22 trailers, and we were not alone. We were growing at one period of time a classroom a day. So we know, and I know, I've experienced it. But I still have some serious concerns about what's going on here. I realize Idaho is not a wealthy state by any stretch of the imagination, and people do the best that they can. However, I attended meetings about what was going to happen with school, and at no conversation did they ever say Nexa was not going to get the new school, or that that was even a possibility. So how is it that Nexa can be put on the back burner after 2 years? I don't understand that. Either it's a priority or it isn't. Every school deserves a reasonable space to teach and learn and work with kids. And if you don't have that space, there's an obligation there. Now, I know you're saying, well, we have lots of trailers, there are lots of schools. But let me suggest this to you. Learning takes place when schools can build relationships with students. Very often, these relationships are built in common spaces. Common spaces have specific functions, but they're also areas where students build a sense of community, a sense of belonging, a sense of safety. They learn new things. These are areas where schools can communicate and connect, and they unify a school. That's a powerful thing. When the cafeteria, the library, and the gym are large enough to accommodate the student body, schools can survive and thrive with trailers. When they don't have those spaces, you really inhibit the opportunity for schools to do what they need to do in those common spaces, and also inhibit their ability to create that unity, create the identity, and create a positive learning environment. You can impact the culture of a school. That's powerful. So how can we say to a school that has no common spaces that are large enough to conduct the work of the school that it's not the most important thing you're doing right now today? I have a hard time with that. And Nexa doesn't. There's not a common space in the building that's big enough to do the job it's supposed to do. Our PTA meetings, Mr. Rutherford talks on closed circuit. Do you know if parents have a question, they can't find them? Where do they go and ask the question? They don't have that opportunity. We are disconnecting the community from our school by design if we don't help. And that's a powerful thing. I won't repeat what Mr. Rutherford said about our library, and I appreciate the schools and the Hayden Public Library who donated schools to us, but the fact remains, we don't have the standard issue library startup that every other school has. If your child was in that circumstance, would you be a little concerned about that? That we don't have equitable resources with other schools? We have teachers that don't have offices, that don't have classrooms. How do you justify that? And you can't say, go teach in the hall. Have you been in our halls? There's room for one classroom, and if you put a desk there, the kids are going to touch it as they go by, because there's not enough space. So being in the circumstance where we may lose this new building, I think coming to code is something I haven't heard, and I apologize for that. I missed the meeting where that was discussed. But I have to say that you can't fix what's wrong with Nexa with trailers. You can't create a cafeteria that's big enough, a gym that's big enough, a library that's big enough with trailers. You can't create the space that helps the school become a school that has a culture and a learning environment that's productive. So I really hope that you will listen carefully to what our needs are, because I've been in a school with 22 trailers and we made it work, and I know how. But you can't do that if you don't have the space, the common space, to create the unity. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Okay, next up is Kathy Ryder.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. My name is Kathy Ryder, and I'm a special education paraprofessional at NEXA. I love working at the school where the children come first, and we include all children in their classrooms. If I had a dream, it would be that we could be fully staffed. It is very hard to meet the needs of our children when we are covering for others, being pulled for a student that is having a difficult day, and we're still supposed to be teaching in another classroom at the same time. It has been a privilege to work with the NEXA staff, and even in this old building. I love all the hugs, the high fives, the smiles, the finger taps I've received every morning at drop-off, and many times during the day. Thank you for your time.
Okay, next up is Laura Nelson.
Thank you, members of the board and Superintendent Dr. Cook, for having me speak tonight. Thank you for letting all of us speak to you. I'm the treasurer at NEXA in the PTA, and over the last 16 months of my life, I have dealt with this topic almost daily, and I am not ignoring it. The certainty and the questions surrounding NEXA's site have greatly impacted our small community. Now that a decision has been made to build off-site, again we are faced with more uncertainty. What will happen to my kindergarten student? She has 5 years to go. Will she be left behind? What about the other 448 kindergarten students at NEXA? Do they just get left without? No music program, no computer lab, a playground that's dangerous, a lunchroom that's too small and inadequate, no security. May I go on? What about our staff, our amazing staff? They transferred from other buildings with the promise that they would have a new facility. Now they're making it work. Are we left behind? The families in my cul-de-sac that pushed to stay at their original location haven't had to deal with this. They have been allowed to stay at their current school that has less students and haven't been affected by any of this. We speak often. They live across the street from multiple. It's not possible to me that portables with 480 students inside have a faculty and the necessary requirements within their schools to work together. They're in groups together. They're eating together in the cafeteria. They're working together in the the gymnasium. They're having recitals. They're having carnivals. We can't do any of that. We can't do any of that inside of our school. There's not enough room. There's fire code. We can't do those things. So my kindergartner just doesn't get to experience that because she's in the NEXA site. That bothers me. That concerns me. Not that she's not getting a wonderful education with an amazing staff, with PBL-based learning. It's amazing and it's great. But she is going to miss out on certain things and go into 6th grade not having those experiences, and that bothers me. So thank you again for listening to us this evening. And please consider portables being something that can be used in schools, but their common area is still there for them. And at NEXA, we don't have that. So thank you for listening.
Okay, Vanessa Studeker. Stodeker, is that right?
I answered anything. All right, good evening, Board Chair Morrisroe, Superintendent Dr. Cook, and members of the board. My name is Vanessa Stodeker. I'm a special education teacher at Northwest Expedition Academy, as well as the parent of a student who attends there. I want to share with the members of this board how grateful I am to work with the NEXA family. Here at NEXA, well, there at NEXA, children come first. From the way our morning greeters smile, high five, and finger tap each child as they enter our gates, to the group goodbyes at the end of the day, it is evident that our family understands that it isn't just the time in the classroom that matters, but from the very moment students set foot on school grounds. The NEXA team isn't content to just follow traditional education maps. Society has evolved, and our education system must evolve with it, or our students will be left behind. At NEXA, through the efforts of our dedicated team, we have transformed a tired old building with slight resources into a vibrant learning community. We believe project-based inclusionary learning allows students to take charge of their education. Our students find purpose, obtain the essential strengths for the 21st century workforce, have agency over their education, and develop deep-rooted knowledge in the work that we do. We are able to do so much with so little because we are committed, passionate, and hardworking. Just think of how much more we could do with the same resources that are available to the other schools. We have a part-time ALP teacher, a part-time Title I teacher, a special education teacher that has a caseload that warrants 2 teachers by multiple measures. We are limited. Our team always looks at how we can do more with less. With the same care other schools in our district are afforded, we would be able to soar. I love our tired old building. Our students bring it purpose and life. Our staff radiates passion, caring, professionalism, and dedication to our students. We are a family, and I so love that I am part of it. I am so lucky to be at that school. Thank you for allowing us to start something that we believe is right for children, and please allow us to continue to do our work. Thank you for your time.
Next up is Dr. Morrow.
Good evening, board. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to come back and take my 3 minutes of public comment. I promise not to waste your time and come back with more repeated information. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a child psychologist in Coeur d'Alene. I provide therapy services to children and teenagers. And I'm on a mission to try to get our school start times changed for our adolescents locally. There are national policy statements across the board saying that teenagers should not be in school before 8:30 in the morning. And I want to speak today on 2 points that I haven't had time to bring in previous comments. And these are things that people tend to get stressed about with the idea of this transition to later school start times. And that is number 1, sports, and number 2, money. Those things matter a lot to everybody. So when it comes to athletics, often coaches are very stressed with the idea of school start change or school start times changing because that can impact after school practices and traveling to sports. But what we know in the professional sports world is that sleep is considered the singular most effective and powerful performance enhancing tool. Nothing matters more than an athlete getting consistent sleep over time. What we know is that student athletes who get less than 8 hours of sleep per night have a 68% increased chance of getting injured. The amount of sleep duration is the strongest predictor of injury amongst athletes, more likely to cause injury than things like the number of hours you practice, the number of sports you played, or the coaching style that you're being taught with. Sleep is the most protective factor for athletes not getting injured. We also know that poor sleep leads to a reduction in reaction times, and that we see things like less hand-eye coordination, reduced peripheral vision, slower healing and growth of an athlete if they're not sleeping. We know that when we get enough sleep, we are faster, stronger, more accurate, we have fewer errors, and it increases our endurance. And we also know that when school start times are pushed back, we have more teenagers participating in extracurricular activities. It turns out if you're not chronically exhausted, you may have some energy to want to do something fun and good for yourself, like playing a sport. So we have had coaches nationwide say at first they were highly opposed to this change, But once a change was made, the effect in their athletes and their student athlete body is astounding. The positive changes are felt incredibly powerfully by coaches. So we can do this with sports. My other hope is that if Coeur d'Alene can take a serious look at this issue, that we start to reach out to all of our neighboring towns and schools and say, hey, we're going to make this change. Can you guys be part of this too? Can we get athletics to coordinate some of this plan in our region? So there's that piece on sports. And then the other thing I want to talk about is money. So don't just take my word for it. There was a massive study done in 2017 by a group called the RAND Corp. And the RAND Corp is nonprofit, nonpartisan, essentially a think tank of researchers that try to look at large societal issues and figure out what can we do to impact the greatest positive change across a society. So they did a projective cost-benefit analysis of school start times in the United States, and they took a very conservative approach. They looked at only 2 factors, one of which was improved academic performance, because we know we see about an increase of 13% in high school graduation rates and an increase in about 10% in college attendance when we push back high school start times. So they looked at improved academics, and the second factor they looked at was reduced car accidents. Now, they did not weigh in anything like changes in mental health, reduced suicide rate, obesity rates, juvenile justice system involvement, delinquency. They said that's too hard to quantify. We want to look at the hard numbers on car crashes and school outcomes. And from that analysis, they estimated that there would be, within a 2-year time span in our country, all initial costs recouped. Within 2 years, any initial upfront cost around transportation changes, schedule changes, would be regained by a society, by a community. And they have projected that within 10 to 15 years, the U.S. would be on average having a $9 billion per year economic gain from changing school start times. Schools didn't used to start so early for teenagers. That shift came to be about 50 years ago, with the hope that teenagers would become babysitters for younger siblings. We're doing it wrong. We're causing harm. So the end of that economic analysis, they said that the benefits far outweigh any immediate costs. Those costs will be recouped by any community that makes this change. And they say that the cost-benefit projections suggest that delaying school start times is cost-effective and a population-level strategy, which could have a significant impact on public health and the U.S. economy. So we can do this economically, we can do this with a thriving sports system, we can do this and have improved academic outcomes, greatly improved mental health. One stat I'll just share with you, there's nearly a double the increased risk of suicide when we have sleep deprivation in teenagers. Almost doubles the risk of suicide. So there's so many reasons that we need to do this, and we need to do this sooner than later. So thank you for your time, board. I really appreciate you hearing me. Thank you.
Okay, and batting cleanup is Bree-Ann Weinberger.
Good evening, Dr. Cook, Board Chair Casey Morrisroe, and the rest of the board members. My name is Bree-Ann Weinberger. I'm the reading specialist, and which means that I am, so as the reading specialist, I'm the advanced learning program teacher at Point 5, as well as the title teacher at Point 5. And at the last meeting when I spoke, I had some co-workers and parents come up to me, and most said that I looked pretty nervous, and they appreciated the points that I brought up to the board because they were their points, which I thought was wonderful because I want to advocate for all of them and all the students. They also said that they were thankful that I was up there because they would be too terrified to come up themselves. And I thought about that and I was like, I am terrified. I'm actually terrified that we keep putting students into the Hayden Lake current Nexa site. I'm terrified that if we don't advocate for it now, we're going to go to a new school. It doesn't matter if we go to the new school. Somebody else is going to get put in that school. And I'm terrified that there's not urgency for the 316, I might be off on my numbers from the last time, over 310 students and families that they're put there. I'm terrified that somebody's just going to look at the numbers and say, this is the fiscally responsible answer, that we are going to take care of all of those students. Because I'm thinking of those students who already spent 180 of their school days at this school that's inadequate.
This is the second year. So then that's 360 days that these students are in a facility that is not appropriate. Compounded onto the fact that a few years ago, we sent all of the kindergartners into this isolated kinder center and said that that was a solution for their education. Then we found that their scores went really low. And as a first grade teacher, knowing that those kids came in, and I was like, oh no, they were an island and we weren't servicing them to invest, inspire, and innovate as we want as a district. I am concerned that Winton got to sent there for a year and they thought that that was okay. And they came and then they took what they thought they needed to take as they went into the new building. I'm concerned that this is going to be a repeated pattern. And it took me about a year of board meetings to realize that it's not about me. It's not about Nexa. It's not about our staff. It's about the fact that we have students that we are not giving the same opportunity to. And when we look at the population of these students are the ones that we need to wrap our hands around. These students are the ones that, if you look at it, we are the 5th with free and reduced lunch population. And we know that that correlates with a home life, that we need to come in and give them that equal opportunity when they come to learn. The Department of Education states that the correlation between a facility and the performance of the students within it had this trend line. And I want our school board, our district, to give those students the same opportunity. So I'm not looking at financial numbers on the line. I'm looking at those 280 students last year. I'm looking at the 318 students that we have this year. And I'm looking at the 2 years until this situation is remedied. Therefore, if this doesn't get solved, we already have over 1,000 students that we're saying we're giving adequate facilities to, an adequate learning environment, and that's not okay anymore. And so I think that this urgency, this understanding, this advocacy for these families, it needs to happen. It needed to happen when Kinder Center went there. It needed to happen when Winton was forced there. And thankfully, Nexa has one of the best staffs to advocate for those students, and we will continue to do that even when our students are in that building, because we believe that every student in the Coeur d'Alene School District deserves an adequate learning facility. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you to everyone who signed up and came in and provided us comments. That will close our public comments for tonight. And we will move on to our consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda items A through J?
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on those? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries, Ms. Westberg. And we'll move into our information items. And Dr. Cook, is this first one, you going to start with this, or are we going to Mr. Voeller?
Yeah, let me bring Director of Operations Jeff Voeller up to the podium, and we've got some data to share with you guys.
Good evening, Superintendent Cook, Chairman Morrisroe, and board members. Tonight I'm going to provide you guys with some information that's to enhance some of the questions that have been coming up, and I was asked to put together some information that I think will give us some facts that we can just kind of consider for some future conversation. The first, we're going to talk about lockers at the high schools. So I was asked to take a look at the current locker count, and so I broke it down into the two larger high schools were the ones that we were really addressing this issue with. So Lake City High School currently has an enrollment of 1,653 students, and they currently have 1,252 lockers, of which 1,032 of those are assigned. So if you look at the shortage, that leaves you 401 lockers short based on their enrollment as of today. Actually last week, if it's changed today, I don't know. And then looking at Coeur d'Alene High School, their enrollment is 1,376. They currently have 1,172 lockers installed, and there's 64 that are currently on order that will be installed over spring break. So that would bring their total to 1,236 lockers. So looking at their enrollment, that would leave them 140 lockers short. I talked to Principal Heller just a little bit about locker use and how they do use them. And a lot of students are just using backpacks to go to and from class, and currently that's what they're being allowed to do. Some students will go to the locker, maybe put a jacket in, but a lot of them are just traveling around with their bags during the day. So I guess oops, oh, go back there. Okay, so moving around, the point I was going to make, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there, is that the lockers are voluntary. So during registration, they can go sign up for lockers. So not every student is requesting a locker as well for that. So I think these numbers were to kind of look at, what are our total needs. So if we look at the total locker count that we would need between the two high schools, it'd be 540. I took a look at some facts for some lockers that we recently purchased, looking at those 64 that are going to be installed over spring break at Coeur d'Alene High School, and it averages about to $245 a locker. So if we were to fund all 540 lockers, we'd be looking at just over $132,500. The second thing I'm going to talk about is the HVAC system status. We started a conversation when we were talking about deferred maintenance, and I presented some fairly detailed information in your board packet, but I simplified some of that a little bit here just to kind of talk about what really we're looking at in terms of the different systems that we have. To speak on fairly simple terms, there's really two different types of HVAC systems that we have in the schools. And you'll see these broken down really detailed in the board packet, but just to summarize kind of what we're looking at, one of the major systems we have is what you call a water source heat pump. And basically what we mean by that is there's two wells that are drilled to allow the system to happen. There's a well that's drilled into the aquifer, that's bringing water up into a system. It basically flows through a series of pipes into the buildings and then goes to like a mini heat pump, and it's basically taking the heat from the constant heat of that water, and it can heat and cool based off of that. And I'm not going to get into the technical terms. We need an HVAC expert to get into that, but it's a very efficient system. The schools that have those are Lake City, Hayden Meadows, Fernan, Woodland, Skyway, and Atlas. So if you look at Lake City, for example, you see the number in the red there where it says 107. Almost all of those are a mini heat pump unit that's in that system. So as the piping goes around the system, it hits that mini heat pump, and that's providing the heat and the cooling for the rooms that is provided off of that unit. So there are a lot of units in these facilities based off of size. The second type of system that we have are rooftop air handlers, and basically those are either a zoned or a single supply system. And so the remaining schools basically have those. So they sit on top of the buildings, and they'll either heat or cool. Some of them are just heating, some of them are heating with cooling. And so there's a kind of a variety of different systems in what we have in place with the schools. What I did in this slide is I wanted to give you guys a comparison based off of the age of the systems. And so if you look at the red column, those are the systems that we have that are 20 plus years old. And depending on the exact type of the unit, the lifespan of those systems are going to be anywhere between 25 and 30 years, and most of these are at 25. Some of them are at 29 years, and some of those details are included in the board packet if you want to look at the exact breakdown of what those are. But what I wanted you guys to get out of this presentation tonight and out of this slide is to take a look at the top 7 schools that we have listed there that are bracketed on the left. And those are the schools that we did, actually including Skyway and Atlas, the 9 schools. We had JTL Engineering come in and do a technical report in 2018. And they basically recommended that all of those in red we really need to strongly consider making replacements for, and those were the ones that we had listed under deferred maintenance with some cost breakdown on that. Some of those schools then have some that I put into the yellow category. Those are 15 to 20 years, so that we need to keep those on the radar for future improvement. And the numbers that you're seeing are the number of systems, so either the number of the heat pumps or the number of the actual rooftop units that are listed in there. And if you want details, I've got all kinds of charts and maps and things that I can provide you to show you what exactly those are. And then the ones in green are systems that are relatively new that we should expect quite a few more years out of. And then if you look below the line, those are systems that were recently updated at those different schools, with the exception of a couple. You see Canfield, 2 of the units on top of the existing gym didn't get replaced during the past bond. And the Lakes systems are 10 years old, so those are getting more towards the yellow, but they're still currently in the green based off of the current age of those. And so those were all updated and past bonds and are, within all less than 9 years old. I think most of them are about 6 years old on those systems. So kind of gives you a summary of what we're really looking at with the status of those HVAC systems. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about tonight in this portion of it is just to give you guys an update on Lakes Middle School. I'm pleased to announce that this week we'll be doing a bid opening at General Construction for the bids on Lakes Middle School. That'll be a public bid at General Construction, and like I've mentioned in the past, we will be collecting those bids, and they're going to be individual bids from trade contractors, and then General will need some time to assemble those bids to give us our final price. So it's a little bit different than the design bid build that we've done in the past, where it's general contractors just giving us a one lump sum price, and we're kind of comparing those prices. So we'll be looking at different bids from electrical contractors, heating contractors, plumbing contractors. Then we'll need to sort through those, make sure they met the spec, everything is qualified, and then put together a final price, which we'll be bringing to you guys at the next board meeting in March. We did have a pre-bid walkthrough last week at Lakes Middle School, and we had quite a few different contractors and some new contractors that we haven't seen before attend that. So it was encouraging to see some different people. So I think we'll have a nice variety in that pool that will be participating in this bid, we hope. So more to come on that. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
That bid opening is this week?
Yes, Wednesday, 3:30 at General Construction.
I didn't have any questions. I just wanted to thank you for the HVAC update, and I think kind of give you an explanation of why this was an important piece to me. At ISBA convention this last year, I was able to go to a breakout session, and I thought it was going to be an esoteric session on classrooms of the 21st century and neat pictures of classrooms, but it wasn't. It was a basic presentation on the three components of the ideal learning environment: HVAC, lighting, and noise. And this group, University of Idaho, an architectural firm in Boise, talked about that these three components do directly affect learning. And I feel as though we have some HVAC systems that need attention and need to get looked at, and CHS in particular. And when I look and see that we had HVAC systems updated in and it's actually the 2012 bond, I think it's important before we parse out contingency money that we ensure that if we're not going to do updates to some of these HVAC systems, that we ensure that there's quality air circulation in these classrooms. And so I thank you for putting this together. It's nice to see it in one place and kind of know what's ahead of us.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Voeller. Okay, we're into action items, and our first action item up here is a course pacing guide. This is on digital design and intro to yearbook. We saw these last month for information, and so they're back for us for action. They've been out for public comment for the last 30 days, or this is one class. It was out for public comment for the last 30 days. No comments were received. Dr. Nelson's not with us tonight because he's with the curricular audit folks, so that's why I'm introducing this. If you have any questions, I'd say we direct them to Dr. Cook. If not, is there a motion to approve digital design and intro to yearbook as presented? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Motion carries. And item C, we amended off the agenda earlier, so we're down to item D. And these were policies for action. Again, these were policies we saw last month. And there were a couple comments on these, so why don't we take them one at a time? Is someone covering these tonight? No? Okay. Dr. Cottle, are you on the discipline, I believe? Yeah, she's got the discipline.
Yes, good evening, Chair Morrisroe and board members and Dr. Cook. Yes, the one that I'm reporting on is 3330P3 student discipline. We did receive one comment. The comment was basically asking us not to be lenient. And really the changes and corrections we made really aren't lenient. It just clarifies when a student is brought to the board for expulsion. So I think it was more affirming what our policy is. So I'm not sure if there's any other questions on that procedure.
I just had one clarifying question, I guess, on on the red line there, that was under other drugs, and I believe we changed the language from be subject to expulsion to be recommended for expulsion from school. And I guess I just want to make sure that wording could be kind of two meanings to that, I guess, on that wording. Are we saying the administration will recommend or must recommend expulsion from school, or are we saying that they must have an expulsion hearing?
It's saying that they will recommend for expulsion, which means they'll have the expulsion hearing. And that's language that is under vandalism and arson above. And that last sentence, recommended for expulsion from school. We've been trying to basically be consistent with that language. I think what happened under the other drugs is principals weren't sure, do I recommend, do I not recommend, do we just do in-house discipline? And so in trying to be consistent, we want to let principals know that that's serious enough, that that's an offense that needs to go to the board for a hearing for expulsion. And then, of course, in the hearing, if there's extenuating circumstances, principals can still give their educated opinion on what direction they would like to see.
Okay. Any other questions on this policy? Okay. Is there a motion to approve policy 3330P?
So moved.
Okay, thank you. It's moved and seconded. Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Dr. Cook, is the next one you?
Yeah, the next one, policy 5260. I think we've got Nicole Pekarski here too. We could, this has been in front of you guys many, many times, and I think it's been this is one of the just tricky, right, on the language, and what you've seen from this one. The biggest change that I think we wanted to make sure that the board was aware of today is due to the comment. We actually got a comment that on the report or cause to inform didn't align to the statute, and the language on the statute is report or cause to be reported, so we wanted to recommend that that was changed. So we'd like to ask you to talk about this or to accept that modification on page 125 of your packet, 5260P-2, number 3. See the blue line? To just change that to report or cause to be reported. And I think, I don't know if you'll have any questions, and I think I can probably answer them if so, but I'm glad to have Nicole here too in case the questions get really specific.
Okay, questions on this? Like Dr. Cook said, I think we've had this twice before and had a lot of discussion around it, and had some comments along the way and improvements and tweaks along the way. So. Okay, so that edit that you just talked about is in 5260P-2. Okay, so I'll try to word a motion for this, and then you tell me if you like it. So is there a motion to approve policies 5260, 5260P, and 5260F with a edit to policy 5260P in the blue line section to now read to report or cause to be reported?
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on that? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Motion carries. That one was deep. Okay, so this next one, item E, Northwest Expedition Academy Facility Standard Board Discussion. So this was something that I talked to Dr. Cook about, and I know I gave you guys a heads up that it was something I asked to add to this agenda for tonight. And as Dr. Cook and I talked about it, we talked about this resolution format. It was something that they used successfully in Dr. Cook's previous districts that he's been with. And really what my thought was, and what I'm hoping we have some agreement on is, and we've heard some of it tonight, but we've had broad conversations over the last 2 years, and things have changed within 2 years, and promises have been made and promises have been broken. And I felt it was important that as a board we take some position. And really, I think it's just reaffirming what we asked administration to do a few weeks ago when we met, and I think I know it's something that they're already working on, which was really just, okay, we've made a decision where we're building. Let's evaluate the current Nexa site, the Hayden Lake site, whatever we want to call it, but let's evaluate that site and report back to the board with some short-term solutions and some long-term solutions, what that might be, or a plan to develop long-term solutions. So really that's what this resolution is about, is that we just let the Nexa parents and staff know that they're important to us and show that they're important to us by just reaffirming what we've asked and making it official that we want the administration to do that work and to report back to us here in April, I think is what your plan was, Dr. Cook.
That's correct.
And I believe it reflects that in the resolution. So any discussion around that?
If I may, can I interject here? One of the things I'd like to make sure the board is aware of is this resolution. We took a stab at writing what we felt like was a great starting point for the conversation, and so the resolution is not limited to the language that is in that currently captured in it as it's written, but as a kind of a draft for the conversation. And obviously we'd be perfectly comfortable modifying it if you guys are if there are certain whereas statements or things that felt like didn't capture the sentiment or the tenor of the board with regards to this particular topic. So there's kind of two things here. First, the use of the resolution as a way to formalize the board's position, and then secondly, the topic specifically called out in the resolution with regards to the facility and the conversation that I think this board is started last month, and I think is looking to continue until this is addressed in some fashion or another. So.
I think the resolution looks great. I think in light of the comments that I heard tonight from staff at Nexa, I think we need to add a whereas. And not only am I hearing there's inequity in the learning environment, there's inequity in learning and staffing, and that's the first time I feel as though maybe this board's been made aware of that. But there were comments last month, there were reported in the paper, and there were comments tonight, and whether it needs to be an investigation or an added whereas, if you guys aren't being adequately staffed, then we need to know that, and that's something that we should be able to take care of before a new school is open for you. And I am sorry, truly sorry, if that is occurring at your school, and I hope that we can add that tonight. And I'm not sure what you would want the wording to look like, but I would like to know if there's a staffing issue.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with what you said there. And I know Trustee Hearn, who's nursing himself at home tonight, text into me that was something he's watching us live on Facebook, so that was something he was hoping would come up in our discussion, and I would agree. I kind of leaned over to Dr. Cook and just asked about that, and I would think maybe we add it down there where we're talking about what we expect for April, and maybe it's just a programmatic comparison, or I don't know what you want to call it there. But just that we add that caveat that we're looking at facility and maybe some short-term, long-term solutions, and then just a review of programmatic comparisons.
And if it would be nice if we could add, I mean, it's been great that you guys have been able to come and you can get time away from your families, but I think it's time for our board to reach out to your entire school community. So whether we're having a listening session at your school, I think that needs to be scheduled in the near future, because I would like to hear from all of your community what their thoughts are. This is going to be a difficult process, and I think hearing from each and every one of you is going to be critically important.
I know the resolution is here, but I think it's subject to amendment, and so I would have 2 suggestions. On the very first line, I would suggest that it just says, whereas Coeur d'Alene School District is responsible for providing suitable facilities and staffing for schools. And so we're acknowledging that piece of it. And then I would suggest adding into the be it resolved, the second sentence we have that talks about the ongoing discussion will continue regarding the possible, it should say short-term and long-term. And I think that would encompass the conversations tonight and pretty clear.
Okay, Dr. Cook or Ms. Westberg, do you have those suggestions noted that Ms. Brumley gave there? And do we have those, or do we have agreement on that? Okay. Okay.
All right, gives me a little pause. Short term and long term are 2 completely different pathways, and we call out, if you notice down in the therefore be it resolved, when we start talking about the bullets, that the work shall include input and feedback from the Nexus staff and community, that an ongoing discussion will continue regarding the possible long-term solutions. I think we are in agreement that there needs to be a focus on what would be the long-term plan for the facility, but being able to determine the long-term vision of the facility and have that to you by April is going to be a challenge. And so I think we can give you, here's like, for example, I'm confident we can get you the data you would want to know if we were going to say absolutely a standard of facility and planning, facility and staffing that would be equitable or better than all schools across the district. I think we can present that. When we talk about the long-term use of the facility as a part of a 3 to 5 year plan, I'm assuming that's what we're talking about when we say long-term. It concerns me a little bit that we might be doing that without engaging the long-range planning, without knowing and understanding what goals would be over time. And so we're fine with doing that, but being able to give you an exactly accurate representation of that in 60 days without that, we're getting ready to start boundary discussions, a facility analysis, and potentially relocation, or that makes me, I guess I would want some clarification on those 3 bullets down below. The superintendent shall ensure that the following conditions are met when it comes to long-term by April of 2019.
I looked at it more maybe as it was options for this community. We know the facility is going to require, if it's going to be up to equity on part of other facilities, it's going to require a bond or a SPFL. And so I think that's what you're getting at, is that is not a short-term solution or discussion. And I agree that long-range planning will have to be involved in this conversation, but we can outline what the options are and a time frame, and discuss with them what these options look like, where the options are staying at the facility, moving to a new facility, portable classrooms. I think, could we outline what some options would look like?
Just depends on how detailed you want it. In 60 days we can get some rough stuff together, and we can start with things like, we've even started that conversation. There's a list of things that would be considered inadequate. That's kind of the starting point. That's not going to be difficult to analyze, but I think it concerns me that a long term is a very specific. Are we talking about whether or not we want to update that particular facility to a long-term solution? Or are we talking about like if we wanted to go for another bond and build another school at that site, and like those, I think we want some parameters to try to get all that back to you in 60 days, because the scope of the direction on both of those are 2 different directions, I think, is what I'm trying to get to. So I just want clarification. We're fine to do it. And that's why we've added on that second one that an ongoing discussion will continue regarding the possible long-term solutions for Nexus School on site.
I think as we worked through this, I think initially we had kind of short-term, long-term both in there. and by we I mean Dr. Cook and I, as we were kind of massaging this to come up with something to bring forward, and he certainly expressed that concern. I think we have decisions to make before we can really plan for long term. We haven't, formally at least made a decision on whether Nexa is moving or not. We had some conversations around that, but I don't know that we've formally done that. And I think that's a decision that needs to be made, obviously, before we start addressing facility. I have a pretty good idea what that was based on the conversation, and I think the Nexa folks probably do too. But I think if we look at short term, and then maybe as this information comes back, we'll have a better idea as we get together in April and have this information to make some decisions, kind of what we're doing short term, what we're doing with the Nexa folks, and then maybe directing the long term. And so maybe in April you're just coming back saying, okay, here's what we'd need to do to evaluate the facility long term. We'd like to give this to long range planning and have them come up with a couple concepts, and would we continue down the path of what we had previously designed when we were talking about building a new school in the back, or evaluate long range planning a few years ago had a plan that evaluated, I think, just an addition, kind of a big addition to that site. Would we do that? Would we look for another site? All those sorts of things. That's going to take a little more time.
I kind of understand where Dr. Cook's coming, because I feel as though this decision, when it's made, it has to be a non-emotional decision. It's been a very emotional decision for 2.5 years. And I think the input that maybe you're referring to, Dr. Cook, is we need attendant zoning information from a third party that's going to take the emotion out of this. We need an analysis of a site that's going to take more than 30 to 60 days. And so I think we are nowhere near ready to make a long-term decision on how we're going to utilize the site. But I think maybe what Chair Morrisroe is saying, in the short term, we do have some decisions to make. But I don't think we need that long-term information. I don't even think long-range planning will be able to weigh in this year, because they don't have the information that they need. And so I think that's probably 6 months, maybe a little bit less from now. But in the short term, I think we can work towards a suitable solution with the Nexa community. But I would like to hear from all of them before we even weigh in on where do you guys want to be? What does it look like? And I don't know the best way to get that information, or that we have time to organize something before, if we're planning a meeting on this next month. I think there's feedback that we need to get before we continue the conversation, at least for me.
I think it's one of the reasons we have that very first, the conditions for the superintendent is feedback sessions, right? And not just with staff, but with also the community. And I think what we're trying to define is, we can bring you everything from not spending $1 all the way to brand new facility, brand new, meeting the vision of what would come out in a listening session, and try to get everything in between. And we can deliver that, but that also doesn't give in those 30 days, or in 60 days, excuse me. But you also want to engage in what's the grand scheme, what's long range planning's role in this, and so we can provide that. But I fear that what I don't want to do is in April we provide you with this kind of continuum of options that start at nothing and go up to, and I'm estimating here, so this doesn't count. Nobody write this down. $15 million, right? That range of options, and without engaging the long-range planning. What I don't want to do is waste those 60 days by saying, okay, because now here we are right back to a spectrum of choices with no further progress on anything. And one more thing I want to add, sorry. I think the most critical piece of this, while we need to work pragmatically and be responsible with taxpayer dollars, at the bottom of this is a commitment that no child should ever go to school in substandard conditions. And I think that's a very important piece of this that is going to drive, whether it takes us a little bit of time. I think, no one wants to subject any child to that. But I think if we can provide a path forward, that there are a lot of people that are willing to say, okay, now we at least know where we're going. If it does take time, we can swallow some pills and move forward. But this idea of treading water and just never knowing, I think, is creating some problems for us. And so part of this resolution is the commitment that we will not drop. We will not drop on this, and we will not let our standards fall for these children.
Yeah, part of this for me, and I know for you guys, was just kind of formalizing this, like I said before, saying to the next folks, we hear you, we know we've disappointed you, we know you have concerns, and we're committing ourselves to investigate those and see where we can help. I think that's, for me, that's the point behind this.
And I guess two things that I heard today, in addition to the inequity in staffing, was ironically portables as an option, which I would be interested just to hear more about that, and if that's even something that is viable, and meeting space, and what does that look like? And so you meet those needs. Do we extend the life at Nexa to meet future long-range planning type goals? So that would be my comment.
And what I also heard is the amazing community, and I've seen that you all have built like your second family, and I love that, and I appreciate every one of you for coming up here and sharing that. One of my children went to the Kinder Center, and I had those same, we're gonna go to the Kinder Center? This is where she's gonna be, and this building, and da-da-da-da-da, and then, not too long into it, she had an amazing, wonderful kindergarten teacher in Mindy Hall, and I didn't care about the building or the facility that my daughter was in. I loved, and I got to see everything that was taking place in that classroom as a parent who volunteered every week, and it was phenomenal, and I can see that and I can feel that from you all, so I appreciate you for sticking with us, and I can assure you nobody up here has wanted you guys to be in that facility for 2 years, so thank you so much for sticking it out with us, and for the volunteers that even come and advocate. It's pretty awesome, so thank you.
I just had a quick question too when you're looking. I heard 2 comments tonight, fire code, but then adding portables. So I was confused. So give me some accurate information on, do we exceed fire code even more by adding portables to a facility? So just so we're clarifying, are we overcrowded? And
Okay, Ms. Westberg, Ms. Brumley suggested a couple edits there. Can you remind me what those were? I think. Okay, and I think we're in agreement on that.
I'm sorry. Am I on now? Okay, she wanted to add staffing to the first sentence there. It's the next one that she wanted to add the long term or the short term. I'm not sure where you guys ended on that, which would have been in this, the second sentence under the superintendent shall ensure. Do you still want to add the short term and long term?
Ms. Brumley, where was that?
It was in the second sentence. So the superintendent shall ensure, when we're talking about be it resolved,
Mm-hmm.
the second indented sentence that ongoing discussion will continue regarding the possible short-term and long-term solutions for the next school site. Yeah.
Sorry, I did not have my microphone on for that.
I'm following you now, what you're saying, and I think we kind of addressed the short term up above, where it's the now therefore let it be resolved. The superintendent to present information and a recommendation to the board considering the immediate needs of the current Nexa facility. So really that's what he's bringing us in April, is that recommendation on the immediate needs. And then down below, those are other kind of conditions, right? He's going to have staff and community feedback. He's going to continue ongoing discussions regarding long-term solutions and continue to engage the LRPC. You still want to have your short-term down below?
Well, in all candor, I was using your words and adding them in. I agree. It's up above, and so I think the intent is clear. I think it's a matter of semantics. So I'm not sold. I mean, I'm not. It doesn't matter.
Okay. Any other comments? So is there a motion to approve this resolution on the Northwest Expedition Academy facilities as modified in the first whereas?
So moved.
Okay. Any further discussion on that? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Motion carries, Ms. Westbrook. Thank you. All right. Next up is all-day kindergarten. We're into information items now, so Dr. Cook, I'll turn this over to you. And this is an update, I believe, on our all-day kindergarten pilot program.
This is, if you recall, we're engaged in a pilot, pay to play, if you will, tuition-based full-day kindergarten in 2 of our schools. We're going to hear some updates about how that's progressing, and we're going to have some data for you and potential options, a little bit of feedback on how it's going as far as costs go. I'll give away the lead on that story. So far, everybody's paid. That's exciting for us. We're still losing a little money, but I'm taking the thunder away from Dr. Roscoe. But we'd like to present this to you guys for kind of ruminating on and just kind of discussion about how the pilot's gone and what might be next. Just depending. If you recall, we've got well, I'll just stop now and let Dr. Roscoe. She's got a team of administrators. We're excited to see them here.
I'm thinking if you keep going, we don't have to do it.
We've talked about this a lot, guys. So without further ado, Dr. Roscoe.
Good evening, Dr. Cook and Doctor. Wouldn't you like that, Chair Morrisroe and board members? We'd like to talk about 3 sort of dimensions of the full-day kindergarten pilot, about sort of the background history, along with some information and feedback about those 2 classrooms from our 2 principals, and then possibilities for next steps, just considerations. And what I'd like to do is ask Brett and Lisa to join me at the podium. They'll offer some information in a minute about what they're seeing happening in their schools, and I'm going to ask maybe that we hold questions till we get through. There's just half a dozen slides, and when we get through those, maybe you could direct questions to any of the 3 of us, maybe preferably to those 2. So the timeline for maybe members of the audience, I believe our trustees know this already, but the idea of a full-day tuition-based kindergarten program was in fact explored already once before in 2010. That information came to us as we were looking at all of this last year, that, we had done this before, we had looked at it. And the board did not choose to pursue that any further in 2010. However, in 2014 and 15, the school board did approve full-day kindergarten in 4 title schools. Mind you, those are not our only title schools. However, those are title schools with free and reduced lunch rates as you see them. And why that is important is because it meant that those schools had greater title funds designated to them to be able to help support the full-day kindergarten program. And of course, you all know that also additional levy funds were a part of that funding algorithm. Last spring, we began to discuss the idea of a full-day tuition-based kindergarten program. the kindergarten ad hoc committee looked at information kind of at length, and we checked with some of our neighbors in the South who were running full-day tuition-based kindergarten programs. We created a report that's just a screenshot of that report that went to the board, and what the board and all of us were aware of is that there were really two places that seemed to be the best locations for that full-day pilot, and they were Meadows and Sorensen, for two important reasons. Not because others didn't also want full-day tuition-based kindergarten, but because both Meadows and Sorensen had clear community support. In fact, it was Sorensen parents who I believe came to the podium and spoke to all of you early on in that conversation. And because both of those schools had space for a variety of reasons. We were opening Nexa, so that offered space at Meadows, and Sorensen had lost their 6th grade program, and so that provided a classroom as well. And we know space is a precious commodity. So those were the two main reasons that we decided to locate those two programs at Meadows and Sorensen. And a lot happened. We wondered, I think at the dais you all wondered and we wondered, when the chips were down, would in fact parents be willing to pay for that $275 tuition, and could we get all the wrinkles worked out in time? And as we all know, that Brett and Lisa and their teams worked really hard to make this happen, and Katie Ebner was really an important part of that process, setting up the finances. So now here we are, actually past the halfway mark this school year, and Lisa and Brett have information for us about what they're noticing in their schools, and they'll share that, and then we'll talk about a couple more slides, and then we'll take questions.
Good evening, Superintendent Cook, Chairman Morrisroe, and fellow trustees. Thank you tonight for allowing us to be here to share. Principal Lisa Pica and myself wanted to provide you feedback from our teachers as well as our administrative perspectives as it pertains to the full-day tuition-based kindergarten pilots this year at Sorensen and Hayden Meadows. In my discussion with Lisa and Kate today, we learned that these results are very similar at both of our schools as it relates to the teacher feedback and as well as the administrative feedback. So tonight, I'm going to start by sharing a few quotes provided by our full-day kindergarten teacher, Geraldine Bryak, and Principal Lisa Pica is going to provide our administrative perspective as well. So Jerry Bryak has taught half-day kindergarten at Sorensen for the past 2 years before taking on the full-day tuition-based pilot program this fall. She says, in quote, "The most notable change between half-day and full-day is that the class is able to move through their day in a more flowing manner. Children are aware of their schedule and seem more secure in knowing what their entire day entails. Most students move through their differing experiences with ease. Full-day kindergarten affords us the opportunity to expand on lessons in reading, math, science, social studies, listening, and listening experiences. And we have time to truly allow for the deeper thinking and the discussion in a variety of those areas. The longer days allow me as the teacher opportunity to extend the learning where appropriate. And we use individual, paired, small group, and whole group instruction. In the area of reading readiness, we do whole group work when reciting ABC letters and their sounds, including vowels, blends, digraphs, and vowel pairs. Students sometimes work in pairs during our reading workshop where they share a book with a friend. Children also do small group work during the reading time where they are instructed at their developmental level. And children often work with a parent helper or an aide individually to address their needs." End quote. So to sum it up, the fact that full-day kindergarten allows ample time for developing student learning in academics is always important. And just as important is having that time to practice and develop student understanding of the appropriate social and emotional awareness through interactions amongst their peers. The full day allows ample time to focus in both of these areas without the feeling of having to rush through the material. So now I'll turn it over to Principal Lisa Pica.
And I'll lower the mic a little bit. From an administrator's perspective, I just wanted you to bring you to where we are. My full-day kindergarten teacher is a distinguished teacher, and she was when she was a half-time teacher. But it's been really interesting this year to walk into her classroom and see the differences in the teaching and learning that's taking place. Our students are really exploring math concepts. They're using manipulatives. They have times to really come to understand. When it comes to science, they actually have hands-on experiences. They are conducting science experiments, which is really exciting. As far as language arts, we see far more writing. The work that's being produced, kids are excited about it, and they're producing much better work. Not only that, but the literature that they're exposed to. It's not only about teaching reading, but they're immersed in reading. And so they're involved in reading different types of literature. They get choice. And in the last probably 5 or 6 years, the deficit in language development that we're seeing of kids in all socioeconomic situations has been pretty significant. And so this gives the students the opportunity to also be immersed in some rich language and vocabulary that is much needed in our schools right now. And aside from teaching and learning, which it's been incredible to watch, but also coming from the community perspective, our parents, working parents, are wanting a full-time program. They want their children immersed in a learning environment, a rich learning environment. And they're paying for daycare anyway. So what I'm hearing over and over and over is that if the opportunity arises, they very much would like to have it. So.
I visited not too long ago with Shelby Rancliffe, who is a title teacher at Fernan, and 3.5 years into a full-day program, they have some pretty rich, supportive data that says that that full-day experience really does help children, especially with those academic skills and that social and emotional learning that Brett and Lisa just referred to. One of the important aspects of the full-day pilot, thanks to our board members, one of the important aspects of that was the idea that we should reserve 5 seats in the program for children whom our administrators or teachers were thinking they could really use a full day. Developmentally, they could really use a full day in the program. Could be academic need, could be social and emotional development, but they wanted to be able to invite children to families of children to be a part of that full day program, regardless of whether they might have the funds to do so. And so they sort of reserved those spots. And I asked Lisa and Brett to speak about if they noticed any impact of reserving those 4 or 5 spots in each classroom for families who might have babies who could really use that full day program and maybe hadn't thought about it necessarily. And they said they would speak to that as well.
Well, the parents that we offered it to were very grateful, and we've seen significant growth in those little guys that have joined us, and they continue to grow. So we are seeing not only through academic growth, but also the social behavior is also growing, and they have become very much part of our community. So it has worked really well at Hayden Meadows.
I would agree with Principal Lisa about that. Additionally, I think that the fact that we have the opportunity to look at the kindergarten pre-screening data to determine on our end whether we feel a student might be better served in the full day versus the half day program helps to address those needs as well.
We wanted to also update you on what we were noticing about the financial sort of impact of the program, and that's difficult to read, but that's an excerpt from one of the 4 scenarios last spring that the board considered. And if you recall, what we were trying to do with those different 4 scenarios is determine how much tuition did it seem like it was reasonable to ask parents to pay, and what would that mean if we had scholarships for children, and how much then would the district need to kick in to sort of make up that difference. And scenario D was in fact the scenario that the board decided upon, which was $275 a month for each family, with 18 paying families, 5 scholarshiped positions, with a cost to the district for those 2 classrooms at about $15,000, and that was a rough estimate from Katie. We know that there are costs associated with a full-day program, and some of those, and especially if you expand that, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but we know that if we're serving students who have special academic or social needs, and if we serve them all day, that's going to increase cost to the district. We know that tuition loss might be something to consider. Katie did some research, and in other school districts where they have full-day programs, they run at about a 95% payment rate. And this year, of course, we're seeing 100% payment. So we know that probably we would need to account for that in our funding algorithm. And it just seems that there are always unexpected staffing costs when we start talking about specialists for a full day and those kinds of things. So what I wanted you to be aware of, trustees, was that there are considerations of the Early Childhood Committee, and they are considerations that that have, that we've been thinking about since last year. And one of them is this sort of obvious note that our citizens of our community have clearly expressed interest in full-day kindergarten. Dr. Cook has had a number of community conversations about that very topic, and I think his response has been that there's been overwhelming desire for that. The other topic that the Early Childhood Committee has been considering is just the fact that families, and Principal Pika alluded to that, families who live in those northern school zones don't have the option for full-day kindergarten outside of that one classroom, and that's a burden to many families in our northern school zones who are hardworking folks and have daycare needs. We also know that there are a number of children who are right now enrolled in our half-day programs across the district who would definitely benefit from the additional support that they would get in a full-day program, and we know that. And we're working hard to sort of mitigate some of those needs, but it's just different when you have the little one for a full day. We somehow wanted to mention to all of you that what's been on our radar is just this idea that we see a significant increase in children who are coming to kindergarten who are not yet ready for kindergarten. And often that has to do with kids who are coming from some pretty hard places and need additional social and emotional support. And we just notice that, and we think the more we can offer professional development to improve the skills of our teachers and support them with the staffing necessary, we just believe that that's got to be a part of our ongoing conversation. So that Early Childhood Committee has been considering what would that mean to expand this tuition-based full-day kindergarten pilot. We know a pilot essentially means let's try something and see if it works, and if it works, let's be ready to scale it. I think that's what pilots do. I think so. We wanted to be prepared, and we've been thinking about what would that look like to scale up that full-day kindergarten pilot, so that perhaps at every school there could be one classroom where there's a full-day tuition-based kindergarten classroom. And of course, the things that we've been talking about have been things like space and staffing and financial considerations. the schools that would require us to consider them are those schools in blue on the right that do not yet have either a full-day program or a full-day tuition-based kindergarten classroom. So there are 6 schools right now in our district that don't benefit from any kind of full-day. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Thank you for the math. I think if I mess up here, I should be allowed to sit down. One of the things that we talked about, I talked at length, and Dr. Cook did as well with Katie Ebner, and we talked about what would that end up, what would the cost be to the district, and her math sort of included the additional staffing, the cost that we discussed earlier, and reasonably speaking, safely and reasonably speaking, it would be about $50,000, which would fall in line with what the district's cost this last year with the full day program. To add a full day kindergarten pilot at those other 5 schools. Remember that she added, it was 15,000, she thought about 15,000 for 2 classrooms. So, and additional support staff in the offices of the schools themselves, because one of the sort of burdens has been to our finance office, our financial office, just sort of keeping track of the payments and that sort of work. So, and that would also include about a 95% payment rate. So, you know that to add full day K to those would be 2.5 teachers, right? To 2.5. Correct. That's correct. Correct. And we know that those are really rough numbers, and we know that we need to budget very carefully. And Dr. Cook might be able to share any insight about that conversation that he had with Katie today.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. I think specifically we ran the numbers on what would it take. Could we maintain a $275 tuition rate? And the answer was yes. And rough estimates were there were going to be 2 costs that would have to be assumed by the district, and that is this loss cost that would be somewhere between $7,000 and $10,000 per school that we think would happen, depending on payback rate. So if you budgeted for a 95% payback rate, that bumps that number to 50,000. If the second number is if we were going to expand to offer full day K across the 5 additional schools, we'd have to have additional support in some fashion, whether it's done in the schools or it's done centrally, and that was somewhere between a $10,000 and $20,000 cost, depending on how it was handled. If it was going to be, it'll probably be a little higher if it's done in the buildings, a little less if it's done centrally, and it would just however we would decide we wanted to manage that. And I think we even ran the numbers on if we wanted to try to make that a net zero, what would we have to charge on tuition, and it does get a little pricey. I think the number we came up with was $340 a month if we wanted to make it a cost neutral to the district. And so
I think Dr. Cook, that is even still in that report as one of those scenarios.
From the original.
Yeah.
Yeah. So $275, keeping tuition at $275 is likely to be somewhere between $50,000 and $70,000 cost to the district going forward. Plus space. And that's its own conversation.
Which of the schools, Dr. Roscoe, on the right column there are title schools?
I'm trying to see. Dalton is not a title school, and that's it. Okay. Skyway is their rate of free and reduced lunch has changed significantly, and whether or not they will continue to get title services right now is up in the air. They're working hard to just make sure that all families identify.
Thanks for this information. It's good, and thanks for staying and giving us your guys' on-the-ground perspective. I know that when we talked last year about this, we provide all-day kindergarten to 5 schools, and I was looking at or 4, sorry, and I was looking at the title rates. And so in the model, I know we had talked last year, when we moved to all-day kindergarten, we know that I think it's a priority that we provide all-day kindergarten when possible to our community. Did we rework those numbers so we're not necessarily saying that all 4 of those schools will have all-day kindergarten, that there may be a fee, you know, for some of those schools where they have a title rate at 53%, you know, that metric that we're using now, I mean, we're going to have to, I think some parents might say down the road, well, why is Fernand getting free all-day kindergarten and we're paying a fee? Their title rate is similar to ours. Have we looked into that piece of the conversation yet?
I would tell you that the Early Childhood Committee has begun to look at the amount of free and reduced lunch at each of the schools. Mostly, quite frankly, what I think there's an opinion that that none of those schools should bump out of that current full-day kindergarten program, but that NEXA, who so closely resembles to them in the free and reduced lunch rate, should be a part of that conversation automatically, simply because of some of the needs that they're seeing there.
Right, I recognize that, but I think, you know, we agreed to 2 schools as a pilot, but coming up with a program that's fair and equitable to our entire district is going to be exceedingly important, and I'm not sure we have that yet. Even, you know, at Hayden Meadows and Sorensen, we're only offering 1 section, and I'm sure you guys could both say next year, could you fill more than 1 class of all-day kindergarten? Would you have 2 sections possibly at Hayden Meadows that would want it? Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, you could expand it easily or not. Is there a need for it, or?
Well, I think we could. However, I do know that our community likes a choice.
Mm-hmm.
So
definitely.
And we have others that want to come into sign up for the full day kindergarten from other zones because they want a full day kindergarten program. So yes, could we, if we were taking children from other zones? Most definitely. But right now within our own zone, I think we're just fine with 1 full day and a half day.
And would you have space to offer another section if you could offer another section?
Yes.
You could.
Mm-hmm.
And could Sorensen accommodate an additional section of all-day kindergarten?
Space-wise at Sorensen, probably not.
Probably not. Because I think when I look along the screening, you know, we do a district-wide screening for all-day kindergarten, and you identified that you save 5 spots for students that need it, but there are many more students that would qualify across the district for a screening. So from my perspective, if we move forward with all-day kindergarten, it has to be a fair screening tool, that if there's a student at Skyway or Atlas or Ramsey where we don't have all-day kindergarten because of space, creating space for those students if the parents so wanted their child to get services, I think it has to be part of the conversation now as we move forward, or at least have a handle on how many students would qualify or could benefit from all-day kindergarten. I'm just curious what that number might look like.
I'm curious too. I know that screening reveals a lot about our children, and also we know that those first weeks in school also reveal a lot. That's why we sort of wanted to leave that open a little bit for those children, because often some of our little ones who come to us late, who don't get that pre-screening, come into the classroom, and it's sort of like hold on to your bootstraps. And those are often children who would really do well. So there are a lot of variables in that conversation. Lisa, I agree with you, and I would say that in general, 5 seats isn't that many in any given school for children who could use that full day experience. And that's why I guess you all have had the conversation plenty about the need to continue to petition our state to think very seriously about full day kindergarten support across the state for these reasons.
I'd like to add just also that this is a priority for us, and I think ultimately trying to work our way towards equity is measured both relatively and globally in a situation like this. And I think one of the conversations about whether or not we'd be reallocating funds that are currently being used to fund any of those 4 that currently have full day K without tuition would be a conversation. The first thing we're going to have to do, the second that we would say, all right, those of you who are capable of paying now are going to no longer, you're going to have to transition them off. And you're also going to have to offer a half-day no-pay kindergarten, of which we're going to have to find space for in those 4 buildings now, because because some people say, look, I'm fine with my kid going for a half-day. So there's I think what we're trying to produce is this plan of we can expand the pilot, but we need to do so in steps that we can manage. But I think it would be difficult for us to try to go from A to Q right off the bat. But I think we would entertain the idea of, if you guys feel like we do that this has been a success, that we'd be willing to talk about what that next step in the conversation might look like. And so we continue to try to provide something that we can feel proud of for all of our kids, and work our way out of situations that are arguably inequitable across the district.
I think for me, I love the idea that we've tried the pilot and that it's worked. And I certainly would support expansion of it. I have concerns, like Trustee May and like all of us, that there is some inequity in the way we do our kindergarten. We have 4 schools that have it for free. We have 2 that have it at a price, and we have 5 that don't have it as an option. And so I'd love to see that addressed, but I think that's a long-term solution. I would guess that we all support at least all day as an option, and I certainly would support a free all-day program, but I know we don't have the money and we don't have the space. But I think there is that subset of the population that doesn't want all day. They're satisfied with half day, whether they're for a variety of reasons. I guess what I'd love to see us look at is just, our demographics of the district have evolved, right? NEXA was brought up. I think that's a good point, is we need to consider those schools and the change in the demographics of our district, and do we need to do some reallocation? And I know that would make people very nervous, at least at those 4 existing schools. Also, the thing I'd like to know is just, where are we on space? Do we have space? I know at Hayden Meadows, for instance, they had 3 half-day programs, is it previously, right? And so you didn't need an extra classroom because you had a half-day program that just turned into a full-day program, I believe, right? So now you have 1 full day and 2 half-day. 1 full day and 1 half-day. Okay. So just what's available space-wise in those 5 schools on the right, and what would it look like? Could we even accommodate it? And so I'd like to know that. And then, would there be an option that those schools on the right that have title, could they use title funds if they want to do something different, I guess? Say, well, we want to fund some of this with our title funds, or we want to make it less of a burden on our parents, or we want to be like Bora and have free kindergarten. I know we don't have space to do that across the board at Atlas or these big schools, but could they do 1 section and use title funds for it? I don't know what the rules are with that, but those are things I'd like to, I guess, hear back as we look to expand.
Those are valuable inquiries. Some information, preliminary information is that in all of those schools that we've had a bit of discussion, we could find space, and it would mean using computer carts, like Chromebook carts, and then taking out the computer labs so that kids could use Chromebook carts instead in their classrooms. That provides a couple spaces there. It would mean classrooms, not those kindergarten classrooms, but certainly a classroom would move to a portable if there's one available. It would be that kind of discussion at each of those sites. And none of the principals on the right over there said that it's an impossibility space-wise. Of course, what we think about all the time is our growing number, our enrollment, and as it grows. But right now, that's what they're saying, is that it's certainly possible. Title funds, that's another possibility. That is a very, very precious resource for those schools. They fund the title teachers who are there and a variety of title nights. And so that's my guess is that would be a kind of a Sophie's choice for those schools. But certainly we can loop Kate Keinert into our conversation about adjusting title budgets.
Hey, Kate, would it be hard as you guys are getting geared up for kindergarten registration? I know it's coming soon, that's why we're starting this conversation. To add on there, when you're reaching out to parents, would you like all-day kindergarten? We're not offering it, but we're just trying to get an idea across the community. It will help the board allocate funds. If we get an overwhelming response that 70% of parents want all-day kindergarten, or maybe only 30% want it, but at least we're checking with each parent that we know has a kindergartner starting this year. What is the real number? Because I don't feel like we truly know, and I would like to know, do Dalton parents want a trial of all-day kindergarten? First, and then secondly, you guys have talked about data, and it was nice to hear. Can we see that data? Can we see the social-emotional piece? And can we see some scores? And so as we go to the community or we're making choices, we're basing our decisions on some data. I know we can pull something, and maybe even some of our programs that have been going for 3 years. Can we see how those first, second graders are doing now?
Sure, and we also have, we're guided also by some pretty interesting national data about kindergarten and the impact of full-day kindergarten in the long term. You know, it hasn't been, for quite some time, what we've been guided by is the data that says by about third grade that improvement sort of levels off, but actually the newest data says, nah, hang in there with those kids. And what you see is by even middle school, those children who had all-day kindergarten do better.
I'd like to see our local data. I think it could be impressive, and it could be an important piece of the conversation.
Sure, and we can certainly get that from our from the 4 schools in green over there about what they've noticed. I think it's pretty premature right now for Meadows and Sorensen to give us a ton of numbers. In fact, we've talked about that, but we certainly have data from those other 4 schools.
Okay, so next steps, you'll be coming back to us?
Yeah,
Is that the plan?
Our intention is to come back next month with a formalized recommendation. I think that, I think we would be, but let me say it this way. I think generally what you'd hear from us is that we're also in favor of expansion. I think we're going to have to do this prudently because we just don't have the funds, and when we start talking about reallocation of title funds, that's a similar conversation as the funding formula change that's going on across the state, that you have to navigate that because whatever we're doing, it's one pot of money that we're impacting other schools. And so I think that's I think right now you'd hear from us that we're pretty comfortable with this idea of trying to provide equitable service and working our way towards a model that is fair for all. And I think right now, and we can provide more data, but I think our first point would be if the board is comfortable about this, we'd like to socialize the idea of potentially expanding the pilot so that each of those schools on the right over there could have the option to provide a full-day K, tuition-based full-day K as a starting point, with the possible exception of Nexa. First of all, they meet the criteria, and secondly, there's not a place to put those kids. We have to have a decision on where we're going to put them. Right now, you heard from the parents that, and they're not wrong, we would have to have a solution that is a place for kids to go, and we would not put kindergartners in portables. That's not what I'm saying. But we'd like to bring that back to you next month, and we'd like to have a decision from this board. We actually are penciled in to start kindergarten registration on March 1st, and our meeting next month is March 4th. So there's a little bit of toe tapping over there going, ooh, because parents are going to be asking us questions. So we'd love to have that information to you and then have a decision in March so we can move forward with whatever decision is made.
Okay. All right, next up is item G, which is mental health wellness initiative update.
We are extremely excited to have this presentation. This is just going to be a tag team effort. We've got a lot of folks who are going to talk to you about kind of current things. We've got a lot of initiatives going on and a lot of programming going on right now that is really about meeting the needs of our kids with regards to mental health and social emotional learning kinds of needs, and suicide prevention, among other things. And a quick shout out to CEP. They're going to be highlighting some of our kids at the State of the District on February 19th. Is that right? February 19th? It feels like it's the right date. So there's part of what we want to do is bring awareness as to the forward progress we've made. This is I'll tell you this right now, it's a work in progress, and we've got plenty of things that we can continue working on, but I'm very excited to have half the team up here getting ready to present to you data on 4 large initiatives that we've got across the district, along with Scott's back in the booth, and he said, do you want to talk about communications too? And I said, well, if they have questions. So he's ready if you guys do have questions about our communication strategies around this as well, and he's going to love that I volunteered him for that. So I'll turn this over. I think Kate Kiner's going to get us started, and we're excited to share this news with you.
In orchestrating this effort, and it's been a delight to work with her. I got to, I was going to say crash one of the nurses' meetings, but I just showed up, and we had a couple things on the agenda, and one was these nurses. So maybe our first slide would be awesome. 8 of the nurses in our district certified to become trainers, and so I got to see them sort of rehearse and practice, and it was, there it is. As a former health teacher, I always think about, okay, how do I make the content accessible? How do I get comfortable with what the topics are so that I can make them accessible to my students? And to see these nurses who were like killing it with content, they knew everything about this topic, but to see them go, and how do you present to people? But to really step up to that and invest in that and be awesome at it was great. So thanks, Nicole. I didn't know you were going to be here. But yeah, it's been a pleasure. So I'll do that first point, and then I'll talk a little bit about QPR in case anyone's not familiar with it. So we have 8 nurses, 10 certified staff. A lot of them are health teachers. And then again, at Lake City, we put out an offer to allow some teachers to certify if they wanted to, and they did. So that was great too. They wanted to be there for their student. They really invested in this. It's not easy. Dr. Cook can attest. They say it's about 12 hours, and then these impossible quiz questions and essay questions, and it's an investment. So along with the certified staff, Dr. Cook, myself, and Trina, Dr. Cottle, certified to conduct these QPR trainings this year. A little bit of info about QPR. Stands for Question, Persuade, and Refer. Goes along with CPR in that you don't have to be an expert. You're not saying to anybody, I'm your counselor now. It's just stepping in and saving a life, the same way that we kind of think about CPR, that it doesn't take an expert to do that. So we decided to run with this year. It's been in the district in the past. This year we made sure that all Coeur d'Alene High School and Lake City High School staff received the QPR training, and I can talk a little bit about that experience in a minute. Then there was kind of this blitz over at Lake City in coordination with the administration there. They made sure that the all 9th graders and 10th graders received, all 9th graders received that. 10th grade, all 10th grade students receive it in their health classes, and there we go. They got a refresher course in 11th and 12th grade over at Lake City, and Coeur d'Alene is working on a refresher for their students as well. That's all in the works. We've got a big focus on the secondary schools this year. We've also got each middle school has trained their staff. Elementary counselors have been trained in this. All counselors have been trained in this. Our crisis assistance team members have been trained in this. A lot of them are also trainers in that, and some have chosen to re-up this year. So those are kind of our stats. We are continuing to work with Coeur d'Alene, but the middle schools are also organizing. We're looking at ways to support their students and getting kind of a student version of this. We did a student version with the Lake City students, and some of the feedback was similar to our staff members. They really appreciate it. Everyone kind of comes in heavy, and it's not pleasant, and they're not excited, but they leave feeling lighter and empowered, and that's what helps us get through the training, especially in some of the more difficult situations that we've been able to train this year, is knowing that this is about empowerment and giving people the tools and skills that they need to intervene if they're concerned about somebody. So the trainings start off with an introduction. We go into some of the local statistics, some of the national statistics. Myths, one of the biggest myths is that if you ask a person if they're considering suicide, that now you've put that idea into their head, and that's one of the first obstacles that people face, is they just don't want to talk about it, worried that they're going to make the situation worse. We go into like a number of myths. Then we look at signs, verbal, nonverbal cues, behavioral, situational, and just kind of bring these to light. Then we talk about protective factors that people might have around them, and having someone who cares about them is a big protective factor, and oh, you're that person. And then we do a little bit of scenario practice. And so, like I said, it's been well received. One thing we're looking at is making it more accessible to our students. QPR Institute puts out a training that's geared toward kids, but as always, you're looking at the kids in front of you and going, okay, this could be like better. So some of the things we're looking at is the scenarios, making sure that that's a relevant thing. The ultimate goal of those scenarios is just to practice asking someone in a situation, are you considering suicide? Are you considering hurting yourself? And so we want to make sure that people hear themselves say that before they leave if possible. So providing relevant scenarios. More feedback was that kids really appreciate it when someone they know is delivering the training to them, so making sure that we're connecting them with people that they know and trust seems to boost their receptivity to it. Yeah, I think that's all I'm going to share tonight. It's going awesome. We've kind of got some goals for the rest of the rollout. We're not finished, and that's QPR.
Hang on. Can I ask you, or do we have any questions for Kate? I have one, which is last year we did a series of community events in the springtime. I think we did about one a month. And do we have any plan to continue that? I attended one of those, I think at Lake City High School. Right. And it was it was great. It was very informational. I agree that asking the question is very awkward.
Yeah.
And we all had to do that as adults and teens that were in that room. So I think it's important if we can continue to share that with the community. And I know Kootenai does some of that as well.
Awesome.
I think that community opportunity was well received by the community. We trained more than 100 people through those sessions, and Suicide Prevention Action Network, SPAN, would like to continue that partnership. They have also expanded their QPR training, and the goal is to offer one training per month to the community all year long. And so I just received information actually on the next training that will be available to the community in that way. And so we have offered to host some of those events through the year. So we do anticipate that continuing.
I would just suggest, because of our excellent communication strategy and our ability to really talk to a lot of people in our community through email and Skyward and those sorts of things, that maybe if we can coordinate with those folks so we're getting the word out on those, that would be awesome.
Okay. Thank you.
Sources of Strength is a program that we've coupled with QPR, and really what Sources of Strength is and what we presented before is an upstream approach. And so if you look up here, this is a diagram of the wheel, and every pie in this wheel is really a protective factor, similar to what Kate talked about before. And so what Sources of Strength does is it tries to build those protective factors in students and in staff, so that way they are more resilient when they deal with the stress of life. So we were very excited. We started our trainings last month, and so I have some information to share you about with those trainings. Early in, actually it was the 14th of January, we went through and trained advisors at all 5 of our secondary schools. I originally reported that we had about 53 advisors, counting district office, but we had some last-minute additions. It was wonderful because we had everything from a classroom teacher to paraprofessionals to a lunchroom manager, and we even had a bus driver that sat in with us, which was awesome. So we trained 56 advisors, 53 from schools and 3 from the district office, and you can see the breakdown there. Also in January, we had our student trainings for all 3 middle schools. The trainings were capped at 50, and they were very full. And then our high school trainings actually occur this week. Tomorrow, Coeur d'Alene High School will have their training, and on Wednesday will be Lake City High School. I thought I would do this with pictures. If you were able to stop by, you would see what it's like in real life. But I know we only had 10 minutes, so I didn't want to show any video clips. But basically what the training is there's 3 parts. Students and advisors make sure that every time that they're meeting together, they have some fun, that they share how they are doing personally with their different sources of strength and how they're coping with stress of life. And then they start planning campaigns. And what campaigns are ways to get the word out to other students and other staff members on how they can capitalize on their sources of strengths. So in this picture, you can see it's in this room, and Mish was our trainer, and she was working with some students, and this was one of the introductory activities they were doing. So here's the part fun. This is Lake students and staff, and one of the activities and games they did is they had to throw a shoe into the middle of the room, and then they had to pick up a shoe that belonged to someone else, and in order to get your shoe back, you had to tell the truth and a lie, and the person had to guess it. And we did this with the staff, and it was a lot of fun because people have to be a little bit vulnerable, and it kind of breaks the ice. I do want to say the smell was a lot different with middle school kids, but everyone had a really good attitude, and they had a lot of fun. The second part of the meetings is sharing. And what the sharing does is that each student peer leader that's involved in Sources of Strength and advisors, they get to share with how their sources of strength help them. And so this was a time where they got to share how a friend was helpful or how a mentor was helpful. And then this is the planning piece. This is where students and staff got together and started planning, how are we going to get this information out to the rest of the school? And so there's some photos here. Some of these are Lakes kids and some of them are Woodland. I also thought it would be helpful to include in your packet some of the statements from staff members. And I know it may seem kind of strange for me to read this to you, but I think they're pretty powerful, and I will just read a few of them and then I'll click through some of them. So this one is from Canfield Middle School. Canfield Middle School has been looking for ways to support our students and staff. This program offers a structure for us to all support each other at the heart of the issues instead of treating symptoms. I really appreciate how students are required to take leadership in this effort. I've talked to many of the kids who went to the training, and they are excited to see how they can impact our school culture. As an administrator, it is valuable to me to catch kids upstream instead of cleaning up the wreckage after the waterfall. With Sources of Strength, I believe we will be able to spend more time building relationships and learning. And that's Thomas Staples, and he's the new assistant principal at Canfield. This one's from Woodland. Sources of Strength is laying a foundation for many good conversations at Woodland Middle School. It has given some great structure to checking on students and staff by using the 8 areas on the wheel as common language when connecting. Their peer leaders are starting to put some action to their ideas, and it is really beautiful to watch. Even teachers who were not at the training are also jumping in and supporting the program. There is such an excitement brewing in the students and staff about running with the momentum that has begun in our building, Sources of Strength. Christy Jo Crowley is a paraprofessional, and she's actually the ISS technician. I'll just read one of these. This is from Jennifer Bowers, the school nurse at Coeur d'Alene High School. There is an overwhelming response at Coeur d'Alene High School from staff and students wanting to join this organization. We're extremely excited to start our first campaign and would like to do it in a fashion that includes everyone in the school. This one's from Kristen Odenthal, a Lakes teacher. Yesterday on bus duty, I had a Lake City High School student who was in one of our first trainings, in one of our first ever trainings at Lakes 3 years ago, stop me and tell me how excited she is that the high schools are starting sources of strength now. She said she and another girl also in one of the first trainings are helping lead the group. So awesome. Kristen Odenthal. And this is one of our groups. So we're very excited. Of course, we're just beginning this endeavor. Groups will start their campaigns this spring, and so I will be updating you in our memos and if we have another update in front of the board. We are also beginning our planning for our next training. We're looking at doing October, where we'll train another group of advisors and 50 more students at each school. So I don't know if there's questions now or if you want me to pass it on to Frank.
Thank you very much.
So TBRI, Trust-Based Relational Intervention. We are just getting started with this TBRI train. It's taken off. So I'm gonna give you a little bit of what we've done so far. So in bringing TBRI to CDA, one of the first things we had to do was we had to get some practitioner trainings. So since the school year of 17-18, we've had 6 people go to the practitioner trainings, which we now have 6 trainers. With those 6 trainers, we're able to provide a TBRI caregiver training. And our first one in district training is actually this Thursday and Friday. And what this TBRI caregiver training does, it provides strategies for the staff and working with children who come from hard places. It teaches them how to heal, how to connect with them. And that has been super important when it comes to our therapeutic support classes. And we're also trying to expand it, not just in special ed, but through everywhere. So because of how amazing it's been with some of our students, we've worked really close with the North Idaho Trauma Care Collaborative, and we're actually bringing the TBRI crew up here. And this is only the second time they've ever done it. Every time we've had to send people to Texas to the training, they're coming up here. And because of that, we're able to send 9 staff are scheduled to attend there now. So at the end of this, we're going to have 15 practitioners that we'll be able to do the caregiver training. So based off of that, for next year, we're looking to build upon that caregiver training. We want to do at least 4 quarterly caregiver trainings next year. We're currently working on a way to kind of minimize, currently it's a 2-day training for the caregiver. We're working with the Department of Health and Welfare and JDC. We're working with North Idaho College, Head Start, everyone that's involved with the NITCC. We're working on how can we condense that, because if we can condense that to maybe a 1-day training, then we can do more than 4. So basically the goal of the whole training is to get everybody trained in TBRI in some form or fashion, because we need to continue towards the goal of making sure that CDA becomes a trauma-informed district. So like I said, we'll just start. Any questions?
I don't have a question. I just wanted to say I echoed Dr. Cook's comments about how exciting this presentation was, because I thoroughly enjoyed reading it. I'm so impressed with everything that our district is doing, and what you guys are bringing is amazing, and I'm super excited to just keep growing it. So thank you very, very much.
I did have a question on our communication plan, but you might be able to help a little bit. How are we getting this out to parents? Through newsletters or?
Yeah, I think, Scott, if you're back there, it might be a good time to pop out. One of the things, he has, he shared with me earlier this week, or I guess it was late last week, and then followed up again today, how many hits our newsletters are getting. And I would have to, I'm not going to take his thunder. I'm going to let him share some of that. But I can tell you that we've made a very intentional focus on sharing things. I mean, maybe you noticed the right after break, I think it was, we did the smoking stuff. Vaping. God, I couldn't think of it. We did the newsletter story on vaping and it was one of our first safety wellness newsletters. So I'll let him talk just a little bit about that and give you some of that background.
Thank you. Yeah, good evening. That last newsletter that we put out last month on district safety and health and wellness just had extraordinary high numbers of hits. So we create this newsletter in our S'more template and share it with all families and staff through Blackboard, but also host it now on our homepage of our district website. So under the newsletter tab, you can go back and read all of those newsletters that we've done this year. The numbers are so high, I'm not sure I trust them, but we're talking many tens of thousands of hits and reads. So I feel optimistic about that, and I think it's a tool that we're certainly wanting to continue to exploit as we tell the story of what's going on. That last one had a nice little featurette about sources of strength, training with the middle school students. We also shared that on social media. I think we'll do something similar as the high school students are trained starting this week. I also want to compliment the schools for the communication that they've been doing directly with the students who were selected. As the father of one of those students, I read those communications and thought, I mean, it answered all my questions about what it's about, and so I think they're just doing a fabulous job at the school level of keeping parents in the loop on what that program entails. And so moving forward, I feel like we just have so much more we can tell about these stories, especially in the spring, as the students start, who have been trained, start to get to work on what they're going to do with it. So I'm excited about after spring break, after levy elections, really digging into some of the details of that, sharing it in many ways. I think we can give a little preview of the Coffee with the Mayor show that Dr. Cook will be taping with the Coeur d'Alene Mayor this Thursday. This will be one of the topics that we'll be covering, the mental health wellness initiative in the district. So we're excited about getting into more detail at that time about everything that's going on.
Well, thank you. As a parent, I read the newsletter and I thought it was fantastic, and it connected. It wasn't one of those newsletters that you just hit trash. It was good, and
Thank you.
And thank you, because I think this information is so important, and I think we're finally getting it out to our parents, which is great.
Appreciate it.
At the elementary level, we are focusing on trauma-informed practices. And I think I've tried occasionally to mention in board notes some of the work that we're seeing and some of the successes that we're seeing. But that first point about the 4 sessions in trauma-informed practices, that's probably been the single most important factor in terms of figuring out ways to address the social and emotional needs of our little ones in the classroom with teachers and staff members who understand what's happening in their minds and understand and are looking for understanding of the kind of social and emotional needs that are underneath the behaviors. You all know, and you've seen reports that talk about how much we suspend kids and how much they spend out of the classroom because we haven't yet figured out how to address their social and emotional needs. So Keith Orchard works with all of our schools. In fact, this morning at 7:30, Lisa Pica was here with all of her Hayden Meadows staff, as was Kathy Livingston and the Fernand staff, to it was a very cozy space in here this morning. It was their turn. They were up for Monday collaboration with Keith. He does a tremendous job of helping them understand how do you create a sense of felt safety in your classroom, and how do you develop all those behaviors so that when a child dysregulates, they trust you to bring them to that place of learning again. His work is tremendous. Several schools have reached out and asked him to sort of coach them through some very difficult situations with children, and he's done an exceptional job of that. He has been also trained in TBRI. We're working to provide more on-site support for administrators, counselors, and teachers. We've done some work with resiliency. I mentioned just now the observations and the coaching support that's happening in our schools. Heritage Health has been our partner in several of our schools as well, offering that support for teachers by giving support to kids and counseling services and their families. And I'm encouraged to see some of those TBRI practitioners that Frank mentioned to you, that they're actually co-teaching and working together with some of our teachers to develop nurture groups with our little ones, and creating a very, very different learning environment for our kids. So lots of work happening at the elementary level, and I mentioned Frank's name, and my hat's off to him because he does not feel good tonight. He's up here like a trooper.
We also included a slide on some of the things that we're doing at the secondary level, and at the secondary level we are also looking for that TBRI training so we can have more individuals trained. Some of the professional development that we've done is part of the ASCA, which is the American School Counselors Association model for counselors, really focuses on 80% of a high school or middle school counselor's time is to be devoted to direct delivery of services to students. So that does have some trauma and therapeutic elements in there. We have provided resiliency training for teachers and administrators through sound discipline. Something that we're looking at right now is working with Keith Orchard to see if we can get some specific training for counselors, so that way they have more tools to put in their toolbox. I did list some of the programs that we have. This is not this is just a sample. We did have that document that we shared earlier this year that really shows everything that we're doing, but I just wanted to highlight a few. Again, Sources of Strength is at all levels at the secondary level. The Therapeutic Support Classroom is therapy that we provide our most intensive students. We do still have our Olveus anti-bullying program at our middle schools, and at the middle schools the counselors have what's called Second Step Social Emotional Curriculum, and they do go into classrooms and do presentations with students as well as work with small groups of students and individual students. At the high school level, we have the Cope to Thrive course, which was originally at Venture and now is being offered at both high schools. It looks a little bit different at each school just because of the time factor, and that is available as a health credit for students. And then we still have the Green Dot Bystander Intervention training at the high school level, and that's specifically for dating violence, and it does dovetail right in with Sources of Strength and QPR and all those other things that we're doing. But again, I would like to reiterate, we're really excited about the TBRI training. That's something that's more intensive, and I think it's important that we have that at all levels and not just at the elementary. And so I think I'm at the end of the presentation, so we would entertain any questions that you have on any of those 4 areas.
Thank you on the update, all of you guys. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. All right, next up, seatbelts on buses update.
As we just spent $700,000 on 7 new buses, we felt like this was a good time to see how things were going on I think we have 6 buses currently out in the system right now that have seat belts, 6 of about 59, I think, total number of buses, so maybe 60, something like that. Once again, Jeff Voeller.
All right, good evening once again. I was sitting here thinking I'm not exactly sure how I rate coming in after the Wellness Initiative, and I can't wait to hear what you guys are going to say about seatbelts on buses. but maybe this is me just kind of digressing a little bit after a 4 a.m. weather call. And but actually, I do want to segue just for a brief minute and just say thanks to our maintenance staff and our facility maintenance teams for getting out and taking care of our facilities when the weather's bad. And so that has nothing to do with this presentation, but I just publicly want to say thanks to them because they do a great job at getting out there in the early mornings and making sure our schools are safe and everything is taken care of. So that being said, I think actually probably what I should have done was just brought a bus, and we could have made this interactive, and you guys could go put seatbelts on, we could drive around the block, and we'll call it report done. So as Dr. Cook mentioned, we do have 6 buses that we implemented at the start of this school year with seatbelts. 5 of those were the general ed buses, and 1 of them was a special needs bus. And then with the purchase of 7 buses that'll be coming on for the next school year, all of those have seatbelts as well. And 5 of those will be the general ed buses, and 2 of those will be the special needs buses. So we're continuing to start to slowly grow the fleet to incorporate seatbelts. And we are the first school district in the state that is incorporating those. And the state is watching. We just got word that they're going to be discussing this on the state level at one of the next transportation meetings on the state levels. So let's see. So in August, as we were having some discussion at the board meeting between the board and staff, we were discussing about how to introduce the use of seatbelts. It was determined that we would train the students and that we'd ask them to use the belts, and we would see how it goes. And we would report back in 6 months, and that's where we're at today. And so here I just have a slide of a couple kids using the seatbelts. And Scott Maben also put together a great promotional video that was able to show these kids using the seatbelts that we've been able to use in part of our training as well. I met with the transportation team at one of their meetings last week and just talked to the drivers that are using these to get their feel for how these are working. And I should back up actually and say so the seatbelts are going on our rural routes and our routes that have freeway travel. And so as we continue to bring more buses on, we can continue to do that and be those routes that would have the high speeds with increased need for safety. So I talked to the drivers and I said, how's it going? And they said, really for the most part, fairly well. Their fears are, they had a lot of concerns initially going into these, and I think, well, for the most part, they have resolved, and, especially in the elementary levels, we're seeing them use the seatbelts and using them very adequately. So I asked them, what did you do? And they spent their first couple weeks just talking to the kids. They would walk the bus as they were leaving school. They would make sure the kids were putting the seatbelts on. They would assess to make sure they were putting them on safely, properly. And then they would get on the intercom and say, okay, seatbelts on, we're ready to go. And really the elementary kids are continuing to do that on a very regular basis. And so those routes are using those belts as we were hoping that they would. And it was really going to be our focus this year to try to implement those with the elementary students. With the secondary students, we did train them. We do ask them to use the belts. They started using them the first couple weeks, but for the most part, they would start taking them off, and now I don't think they really put them on at all. So probably a bit of work to do there. I asked the drivers if the young students have any problems using the belts, and they said, after the first week, after helping some of the younger kids, really even the young kids are able to put them on efficiently and properly. And a couple challenges that we faced using the seatbelts. Ideally, we'd like to use them on some of the longer sports trips that we use, but with just the 6 buses in the system right now using those, that we're not able to get all of the field trips because the drivers are assigned a bus. And so when those drivers go out, and they're assigned a field trip, they just take the bus, and it tends to be whatever bus that they have. So with more coming on, we hope that we can use those on some of the longer trips. Secondly, the belts don't always retract, so the drivers tend to spend a little bit of extra time at the end of the day going back and unfolding the belts and making sure they retract into the seat. We did receive a few calls from parents at the beginning of the year just asking questions about how are we ensuring that the proper use of the belts. And like I said, we did do some training. This is just an example of the training outline that was provided by the manufacturer that we've provided to students on those buses as we go through, and we've sent those home with parents as well. And we do also have a training video that we did show you, I believe, in August at the board meeting as well. That's on the Facebook page or YouTube under the district website. A couple of benefits that we found is the drivers were reporting that it actually increases student management. I think that was one of the hidden benefits that we found with this. And so with the younger kids being buckled in, they're not jumping around, they're not switching seats, they're not standing up on the bus. So it tends to be a quieter ride, a calmer ride, and those drivers are actually happy to see the results of that. On the special needs buses, those aides really like having the buses or the belts on those buses, because it again provides much better control and management of the bus. So that's kind of where we're at with the use of seat belts, and I would stand for any questions you guys have about that.
In regards to kind of the policy or the practice, I know at the start of the year back in August when we initially talked about this, we talked about it as a kind of a voluntary approach, and my guess would be it's something that'll evolve over time. But do you see kind of the status quo as far as how we'll handle things going forward, and as we're adding 7 more buses to the fleet, at least for next year?
Yeah, and we'll continue to try to put those on the rural routes and the high-speed routes and make sure we fill all of those. And like I said, then phase those into the field trip routes where we're going to be on the freeways traveling more. And so yeah, we'll continue to train and work with the students on the use of those as we continue to move forward.
How about in regards to usage? We had some kind of minor conversation about forced usage, if you will, or we're doing it on a voluntary basis right now, right? Kind of an informed.
Yeah, and I think that's something that the transportation staff would definitely look for your guys' direction on where we want to go with that. And we decided at that August meeting that we would write it into procedure, and so we haven't written it into policy for the use, but we have written it into procedure that when available, please use the buses or the belts. And so that's where I think something that would fall in your guys' guidelines for that, of whether you want to give direction for that to become policy or where you want us to go with that in the future.
I would like us to look at making it a policy, personally. I just think that that's a direction we need to head. I think that is going to have challenges for drivers. I appreciate that. I'm not trying to be and not take that into account, but I do think that you can't question that students in seatbelts is safer than not, and I think we need to bring that back around and talk about that as we start to increase the numbers in our fleet.
Okay, we'll work that in the future.
Might I offer potentially working with Trustee Brumley to pose a resolution for how we would approach this in the future that might have included in it some conditions over time, since we would be talking about a policy that arguably could be difficult when you have buses that don't have them at all, buses that do have them, and mixed use in the buses, and in some cases no use in the buses that have them. That maybe we want to consider this, how this policy would change over time with the number of buses that we would. I think we're all committed to the idea that this is good for kids, and that at the very least, you're trying to create a culture of habit and promote them as this is, when I get in my truck, I just reach over and do it no matter what. And that's what we're ultimately trying to do. And my mom telling me to do that isn't what caused that. It was because I eventually understood and knew. But maybe it is a starting point that we need to say, because we value the safety of our children, that I would like to pose that we would be glad to work at building a resolution that you could bring back to the board for its consideration. So
I would welcome that opportunity. Thank you, Dr. Cook.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Voeller?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for providing that report back. Okay, next up is policy for information. It's just one policy, but it's a big one here, 3530, 3530P, 3530E. And I'm just going to give you a quick correction here on the kind of summary sheet that's on the front. I think it said something to the fact that this was just coming before us and that it didn't need our approval. I think that was a carryover maybe from a template. And so this is for information tonight, and then it will be out for comment for 30 days and then be back next month for approval.
And I would like to add to this, this has been in front of you a couple of times. This is another one of those policies that is tricky, but we also don't want to miss in any way, shape, or form. And so we've expanded the number of folks giving us feedback on this. And so I think Trustee Hearn also was a part of that work the last time. And I believe he had some communication, I think, that he felt like the committee had done a really nice job of bringing, I think, some of our, I think one of the questions that we were talking about last month, I think I've got this right, was what does duty to warn mean? And how do we kind of explain that? And I'll reiterate this. Duty to warn is straight from the statute, and so it gets difficult on how to define that. And so we've added the blue line part of this to help qualify what that looks like, and Trustee Hearn was a major part of that work, and I think contributed to that too as well.
Is Nicole coming up on this, or are you just standing for comments, questions? Okay. So any comments, questions? So the red lines we've seen before, the blue lines are revisions based on conversations I think we've had and that the committees had and feedback that they've had from others.
The manual's new?
The manual is new, and I think that was based on a big conversation we had around that.
I really like the manual. I think the fact that it's going to be accessible to parents, students, and handbooks was great.
I had a comment around the manual. I thought it was fantastic. I really appreciate you guys working on that and putting that together. I had one maybe suggestion, I guess I'd call it, and it would be, it's on page 163 of the packet, but it's under where it talks staff professional development in the manual. And there's a huge sentence in there, kind of in the middle, where we're just picking up all sorts of stuff. And it's talking about, I think, at-risk groups, and it kind of defines who several of those are. And then at the end of that sentence, it talks about suicide prevention, intervention, and post-prevention. And that, to me, just got lost in that big, long sentence, and I just drew some arrows kind of bringing that to the front of the sentence. Yeah, it's of that big long sentence in the middle. So it would say something like the professional development will include suicide prevention, intervention, and post-prevention, as well as, risk factors, warning signs. Just chopping it around a little bit. Because when I first read it, I guess, I looked at the suicide prevention, intervention, and post-prevention just being tied to that last kind of subgroup, as opposed to everyone. So that was, and you certainly don't have to do it, but that was just, that sentence read funny to me. Other than that, I really appreciate what we did here, and kind of the wide network we've got assisting us on this. I thought it was great for resources.
Thank you for that. I think one of the things, we definitely can take that suggestion. This has been a point of action across the state, not just in our school district, but this idea of how do districts establish procedures. Unfortunately, the fact that we have to do this tells you how important it is, but the idea of not just policy, but procedures and training manuals on how we're going to deal with and handle crisis, intervention, post-vention, all of those kinds of things with regards to student and staff suicide. And I think this is, people across the state are trying to answer these questions. They're very difficult, but it's very real, and the more that we talk about it, I think the better off we are. So.
Any other questions? Nicole, I just want to thank you. I know we've had some really big policies this year that you've had to tackle, and I know they've been a lot of work, and we've kind of run you through the ringer on some of them. So thank you. I appreciate, you've taken kind of everything under you and just taken it to the next level. So thank you. I really appreciate your work. Okay, so this will be out for comment for 30 days. We'll see it back next month for action. We're almost there, gang. Hang on. We've got just committee reports, and I'm going to do one of those, and Lisa's going to do one. So just math ad hoc committee. We've actually met twice. Tambra filled in for me last week when I was tied up with boat show prep duties. But we had a nice start. One thing we talked about, and I mentioned that I would bring it back just to get your all's feeling on it, is, as you know, last year we approved Math 1 and saw the concept of Math 2 and Math 3, and really the concept was if we approved it moving forward that Math 2 would implement next year and then Math 3 the following year. And I wanted to take a temperature read on the board, whether you want to see Math 2 come before us this year and then we do Math 3 the following year, so we'd potentially be looking at this 4 years in a row, or do we want the committee to bring Math 2 and Math 3 both together so we can see kind of the whole continuum of Math 1, 2, and 3, what those would look like, even though Math 3 wouldn't be implemented till the following school year, because we're not going to switch kids in the middle from geometry and all of a sudden throw them in Math 3. The students who are on that geometry course would still have Algebra 2. The students who receive Math 2 next year would receive Math 3 the following year. So do we have a feeling on that, or do you want to kind of decide that as we go?
Well, since you are part of the committee, do you have a sense of where you'd like to see go?
I mean, personally, I think if we're going down that path, and I think if we've approved Math 1 and Math 2, then I think it would be difficult to all of a sudden transition and say, oh man, we're not going to do this. And I think it adds some clarity for our staff and for our students that, okay, this is the route we're going. And I think if that's what we choose, kind of that curriculum adoptions maybe becomes the next focus as we look at the resource, and is that changing? Because I think that's in 2021 is at least when the math text would be up for review if we kept on the cycle. Personally, this will be the third year of discussing secondary math, and I'm not sure I really look forward to doing it 4 years in a row, and so that's kind of why I brought up the idea or the thought. And the framework was fairly laid out when we saw Math 1 last year as far as what those courses would look like. I think Math 1 changed a lot, and there was a lot more detail put into the plan even after we approved it, right, going into this fall. And I think if we could get Math 2 and Math 3 with those that sort of detailing, that I'd like to see us evaluate both of them at the same time.
Is there time for the committee to do that much work? Because I know last year it seemed like it was a very detailed process. So now we're asking them to do 2 courses in a more contracted time with a smaller committee.
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as the committee, a lot of that kind of scope and sequence work was done already, right? Because it was the big picture plan of what Math 1, 2, and 3 would look like, and we, those pieces or those dominoes were arranged in the columns. It's kind of adding the fine detail. We actually, I think over the weekend, they put out a potential scope and sequence for Math 2, Math 3. So we have kind of the base scope and sequence for that already. And we're, because of the short time period that we're talking about when the committee, it took us a while to get the committee formed, right? So we're meeting weekly on this, with the exception of this week. But I think starting next week, we just did a standing meeting, and we're meeting once a week. And Mike, I think we're talking about bringing it for first look in March, or is that what we're shooting for. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair Morrisroe and Superintendent Cook and members of the board. Yes, our goal is to be able to have a first draft for you on March 4th with a potential adoption date in April.
Are the curriculum auditors having any access to you guys' potential scope and sequence?
Yes.
So they're going to weigh in on what 1, 2, and 3?
Correct. They have access to draft just the same as our committee does internally. They also have a chance. They also have reviewed our implementation plan and the work that we did previous to that. So they've got a general scope as to where we're at.
And one thing we have talked about as a committee is that, like we did this fall with Math 1 and some of the geometry tweaks that we made, where we had the Regional Math Center at Idaho State look at it. They will also look at the Math 2, Math 3 information and provide a report back. That probably wouldn't come until our April meeting, I believe.
Correct. The current way that we've been doing it is we're presenting it for information. That opens it up for 30-day public review, of course, within our local community, and at that time we're sending it out for review. So if there is anything that comes back from the community, from our content teachers, or from the Regional Math Center, we have an opportunity to be able to get the best document to you for action.
And are you guys evaluating an honors course for 1? Because I know this year we're not offering an honors Math 1. So that will be in what you guys are evaluating, and so there'll be a...
The course is available. It just has not been authorized by any of our by any of our schools at this point. We do have an honors ALP currently, Math 1 course that is available.
But not being utilized.
That is correct.
Because the current students who would be in that course are in geometry, right? I mean, it's
Correct.
they're getting
students previous in
ALP Math 1 at
were last year.
8th grade.
Correct. ALP Math 1 is currently offered at the 8th grade level, but it is essentially Math 1. We've only offered extensions within that program to be able to support the needs of an advanced learner.
But technically 8th grade, you guys are offering Math 1 in 8th grade.
That is correct.
So that technically could have been an honors Math 1.
Correct. And they're using the scope and sequence of the ALP Math 1 as authorized by our board this last year.
In light of your comments, Chair, I would agree having them bring Math 2 and 3 to us.
All right. Ms. May, do you just want to talk about long-range planning a little bit?
Yeah, they're kind of getting to the end of their committee work, and they're looking for direction on what, if there's any thing that you'd like to see. I know we had a big discussion about next, and I'm not sure that's tasking them with that this late in the game is right, but I think they really feel as though they haven't done a lot of breakout as far as the group getting together and discussing the long-term needs of our district. So they wanted to know if there's anything that you feel as though would help in a report or an assessment or generally, like for the last 2 or 3 meetings. Direction. They're looking for direction.
And I think at the start of the year, maybe into last year, there was talk about doing what was done maybe 3 or 4 years ago, where kind of small groups broke out and went to schools and spoke with building folks about what they thought their needs were. Have they done that? Do you know?
We haven't done that. We've been using kind of the guiding. I think there was 3 points that the board approved at the beginning of the year, so they've been using those 3 focus points. We haven't done that, and I think they were not headed in that direction, but I mean, that's something they could do. I think because of the new software that the district is in, deferred maintenance is kind of going back to the board. That was not the direction they were headed.
And last year, I will tell you that in that, in that vein, we had several principals come to the long-range planning meetings and present on their building needs. So that did happen last year, and there was information shared with the committee there. But I do think that with the new software and what Brian Martin put together on deferred maintenance, they had reviewed and looked at that, and it probably just needs to be brought together and given as a formal recommendation at this point, kind of where they're headed.
I will tell you the attendance zone, Deb Nelson came and gave a great presentation to long-range planning, kind of what attendance zone committee had worked on and what their last recommendation looked like. And I think they have been thinking that next year, attendance zoning will be something that we'll be talking a lot about. And maybe long-range planning becomes a committee that works with that, and that it's really a separation of
whoever's brought in, and I know Dr. Cook and Jeff are looking at some companies that can help us with that issue, but long-range planning kind of serves as the conduit to facilitate community sessions. So it really is an independent look at our attendance zones, which we haven't done before. So I think they're setting some groundwork for getting that conversation going. So if that's something that seems reasonable to the board, from the start at least.
Well, what about, I think we're all fairly familiar with the need at the elementary level, and with NEXA, with now the elementary school being built at Prairie, kind of the NEXA issue there. We added a lot of classrooms or several classrooms to both high schools this year. So I know there's a lot of crunch. The middle schools are bursting and bubbling. Could they maybe evaluate that? Do we have time to just kind of look at where those middle schools stand, and hey, here's what we've got coming up, and at least so we can move into that conversation, right? As we need to address that we have some heads up, and we're not waiting till next year to talk about that.
And I know some demographic work was done last year when Dr. Olson was here, and maybe we could I think Dr. Nelson might have some of that data. We could bring that to the committee. I don't know if we'll have time to get any more new demographic data, but we could probably use some of the information that we have. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah. I mean, it could just be even here's where we're at in middle school. Our numbers are big, and we have X number of classrooms, and these are the pressures we're going to be seeing, and we're probably going to have to give some direction on that. Are we expanding middle schools? Are we looking for a fourth middle school? So maybe next year that's what their work is really focused on, potentially NEXA in middle school or whatever we decide. But I think that'd be, if we could get something this year, that might be the most beneficial.
Yeah, I think they really want to get the attendance zoning, or they want to get some clear direction on from a third party, independent party. How do our attendance zones look? And now, in light of knowing where the next elementary school is going to be, that's going to change the paradigm. And so we just need some independent information on that.
I would agree on the middle school, and we've heard from quite a few community members at the Nexus site mention K through 8, so that might be something also.
And Elisa, actually one of our long-range planning committee members, well known to Dr. Nelson, is his wife, who suggested looking at our existing land and our existing parcels that our schools are on to see if there isn't some places to grow currently on existing land. And she brought up one particular elementary school. So I think that as part of that, she could be, that as part of that middle school evaluation, do we have growth to expand a middle school or an elementary to a K-8 or something like that?
It's late. We went long like always, so why don't we wrap this up? If there's no further stuff on that, couple calendar things. We've mentioned at CEP on February 19th at 5:30 at the Innovation Collective. And then we're back here March 4th. No mid-month meeting scheduled currently for this month.
Could we get a date on the books to get out to NEXA and have a listening session? I think if we don't decide on something in the near future, it won't happen. And I feel strongly that we've heard from, not the same people, but I would like to have the school together and just opportunity to hear the entire community's thoughts.
Your resolution, sorry, I haven't talked in a while. The resolution tasks us to do that in the next 30 to 60 days. Do you want to have a board session with the community as well? Is that what you're asking for, or are you just making sure that we know to go do that?
No, I think the board needs to be invited. So whether it's a workshop, I think it needs to be, we're sitting there listening, taking in their feedback, and we're able to dialogue. It's not a great opportunity to give feedback and listen very well in this setting. And I think we could invite other community members too. We could do, just the topic in general, but if we don't get a date on the calendar, I wonder if we'll be able to get it done before you guys are weighing in.
That's important, because we wouldn't want to present anything if you guys chose that, we would want to make sure we incorporated that into the 60-day April presentation.
Can we? Have you worked on that already, or
A little bit.
as
Yeah.
far as scheduling that?
No.
And
We
are
haven't
you
scheduled
thinking multiple events? Or
I think we would.
thinking-
I think we would have to do one for staff and one for community. I think you'd have to separate them.
So, what if we make those available for board members who can and want to attend to those? And, if we could divvy it up amongst the 5 of us, where at least we have representation at both of those, then we can kind of share some of that input.
I think also we need to get input, though, from not just Nexa families, from the entire community at large. And so that's maybe the long-term goal that's on the resolution, but making sure that we have the opportunity for the entire community to give input is also important.
For the 60 days?
No, it's 60 days,
Okay.
but I don't think we can make a decision if we only hear from one group. I don't think that's a fair
On the long
listen.
term?
In the long term.
Okay. No, I agree. That's why one of the reasons that we added the conditions about engaging in long-range planning was to make sure we get the full picture. So I want to make sure I understand. We're scheduling essentially staff meetings with the community and with the staff, but inviting board members. Is that correct? Is that what
on the short term?
For between now and April. Okay.
Okay. All right. If there's nothing further, I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting.